meeting need to accept the fact that's being recorded. I think that's the official statement.
Okay, welcome. This is the November 13 meeting of the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board. Again, it is being recorded. For those of us here in Boardman, there's two emergency exits, one through that door, the other one through the front door, and the assembly point is in the parking lot. Jim, you were going to give us a local Boardman welcome?
Yes, absolutely. No, I want to welcome everybody here. It's pretty unique that I don't have to get in the rig and head across the state. So, but I have chasing cows, so it's kind of nice to do that and show up here. So, I would encourage you all during the break, if we get a break, to pop upstairs and another lobby up there, and you can look in on where the port commissioners sit and the dais that's there and the view out over the river. I don't think there's a prettier spot in the state to do business. It's really fantastic. And the port's kind of interesting. It came into being in 1959, and I don't think they got their first clients or, business to move in till 1970. And even as early as the mid 2000s, there wasn't a whole lot here, mostly sagebrush, right? And about 2006 to 2008, things kind of took off. The output was about 890 million in 2006, and by 2008, it was 1.9 billion. It's now well over 2.5 billion, the output coming out of here, and they employ some 6,700 folks, and I probably am undercounting on that. The city of Boardman kind of followed suit about the same time. It was about 350 residents, right? Now it's somewhere around 4,500, and they can't build homes fast enough. A quick little snippet about Boardman. We're kind of looking out at the old city of what used to be Boardman out here. Boardman was moved in 1959 or 52 to accommodate Highway 30, or the Columbia River Highway. A dozen years later, in 1965, it was moved from down here to where it currently is to accommodate the John Day Dam. My mother went to school here out in almost the middle of the Columbia River at this point. It's pretty unique, but it's really growing. If you get downtown or you try and go downtown, you can't go downtown because the entire Main Street is closed down because they're refurbishing the entire thing. So anyway, want to invite you. I think we're pretty accommodating out here. Another fun fact about the port is I've been here almost 70 years. A couple of years ago, they hired their first female executive director. And in 70 years with 5 commissioners, or 350 commissioner years, a year ago, they elected, or the county elected, the first female port commissioner. And that's my wife, and she's sitting over here in the corner, my wife, Kelly. So pretty proud of that, but obviously they're getting pretty progressive, right? So, and really want to accommodate you. I won't go on at length, but Morrow County and the port certainly pretty congenial. I was a past county commissioner, and I had a fellow call me the week before Thanksgiving, and he said, "Hey, my family's coming Thanksgiving Day. Any chance we could take a small excavator out into the county cemetery, and our loved one's headstone has fallen over?" And I said, "Gosh, he said, we'll take the utmost care, and if we damage anything, we'll fix it or pay for it." And I said, "Yeah, I think it's a lovely thing to do. I'll talk to the public works director, but I think that'd be fine." And a week or so after Thanksgiving, he called me back and he said, "I can't believe how accommodating you were. Our family had a great time. We were able to go out there and fix the headstone and nothing was damaged." I said, "I lived here my whole life. I didn't recognize the name of the county cemetery." And he starts explaining it. I said, "I'm still not locating it." He said, "Yeah, it's just off of I-70 up by Richland County. And I said, "What state are you in?" And he said, "Morrow County, Ohio." So I relayed that one time to a Morrow County, Ohio commissioner, and he says, "Well, I'd hoped we'd be that accommodating." So welcome here.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. So we got a busy agenda today. The U.S. Department of Energy is coming in a few minutes, so we're going to rush through a roll call. There will be public comment at the end of the meeting. So we're going to do now the roll call for quorum. Stephen Bedrick.
Present.
Steve March,
Here.
Matty Stitzel, Jim Doherty,
Here.
Mia Burke, Michael Freeman,
Here.
Sage DeLong,
Here.
Aaron Ashley, Tim Seymour,
Here.
Representative Gamba,
Here.
Senator Gorsuch, Representative Levy.
Staff is here on
Esther.
her behalf.
Oh, great, thank you. Esteban Ortiz,
Here.
David Boothroyd,
Here.
Representative Tron.
Here,
And for Representative Tron and David, welcome to the board. We'll give you a little bit of time at the end of the meeting under board business to tell us, say whatever you want to say about your bio and how excited you are to join this wonderful board. So
Thank you.
let's see. Next order of business is to approve what? Yeah. Next order of business is to approve the August meeting summary. Hopefully, everybody's had a chance to look at that. Any changes or modifications to the August meeting summary?
I move to accept the August meeting summary.
Second,
Yep, second.
any objections? We'll approve that by, what is it called? Acclamation. Acclamation, thank you. Okay, Mark, are we ready to move to DOE?
Yes.
So the first order on the agenda is the U.S. Department of Energy, the Hanford Field Office. Are they on board?
They're on board. They're
Okay.
presenting right now.
I will turn it over to U.S. DOE.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Ray Geimer. I have just started a few months ago with the Department of Energy as a federal employee, and I'm in the position of being the manager of the Hanford field office here. And I'm very pleased for that honor. And I'm looking forward to being part of what we're going to achieve here as we advance Hanford now into, from a very successful undertaking that we've just recently completed, and now moving forward and moving into the next phase of trying to improve upon that and initiate a few other activities. So it's going to be an exciting time. I appreciate that you've invited us here to come talk with you today. Wish it could have been in person. But I am also, though, pleased to know that things are at least going to get back to somewhat normal here starting, I guess, any day. So maybe next time we'll be able to actually travel in person. So you can go to the next slide if you'd like. It's there's somebody supposed to be, okay, oh, I'm sorry, go back one. I'm looking at my own slides on my deck. I shouldn't do that. All right, that's me. Sorry. So I've been, while I've only been a federal employee for about 3 months now, a little over 2 months, I've been in the DOE, been working for the DOE for over 40 years now in a whole variety of different types of operation. I've basically worked in every kind of aspect of the DOE that you get that exists. I started out my career, I'm a chemical engineer. I grew up in New York, went to a place called Clarkson College in New York, and gotten interested in nuclear technology with a class that I was taking there. And so I thought, what, I'm going to go into that nuclear field. And I found my placement office an application for a place in Idaho called the Idaho National Engineering Laboratory. And I sent in a resume and turned in an application. And next thing I know, they called me up for a job interview. And as a good New York boy that had never left the state of New York, the first thing I did was pull out a map and figure out just exactly where Idaho is. I thought it was next to Wisconsin, but I was wrong. So I wound up there in Idaho working as a nuclear reactor operator for the first 3 years. I was actually running the reactor and doing the defueling and all that stuff. So I got a good solid nuclear operations background there. Quickly moved into engineering and waste treatment technology development. I did some vitrification technology development using a plasma arc torch as the thermal source for that, and I wound up being part of a team that got a patent on that technology. And then from there, I moved into more of a hardcore waste operation, D&D operation, cleanup kind of a mode. I wound up moving from Idaho to Rocky Flats, and I was there at Rocky Flats for the last 5 years of that project. I was literally the last guy that left Rocky Flats, being the waste management guy. I shipped the last drum of waste off the site and would lock the gate and drove away from Rocky Flats. That was a really amazing experience to have been part of that operation, to be part of that project, to achieve something, as vast as what was achieved there. It was really a good example of, what can be achieved when all of the forces line up to, have a common vision on what we're going to achieve and how we're going to achieve it. So I hope to be able to bring some of that kind of thought process to us here at Hanford as we kind of work through where do we go from here. So, and then I wound up working in Idaho. I did a big construction project as a chief engineer in Idaho, building a waste treatment plant over there. And then from there, I moved on for a stint in Buffalo, New York, at West Valley, doing the D&D of that commercial waste reprocessing plant that was built there at West Valley. And mainly was involved at that time in trying to get the high-level waste canisters out of the building and into dry storage, much like what we're doing with the cesium capsules here at the site currently, a very similar type operation. And then one early March day after the coldest February in record in Buffalo, New York, the manager for CHPRC called me on the phone and said, "Hey, how would you like to move to Hanford and take on a job there?" So I did. I moved to Hanford about a little over 10 years ago now, and this is a place I'm going to call home for the rest of my life. So I love it here at Hanford. I was at 100K, did the sludge removal job out of the tanks at 100K. Or out of the basin, I should say, at 100K. And then from there, I took a job leading the laboratory operation, the 222S laboratory operation. And then finally, decided to step into a role of managing the office here. So been around, done a lot, seen a lot, and I just, look forward to working here with folks at Hanford. We've got a lot of challenges to overcome, but we got a lot of opportunities to pursue with which to do that. So, so with that, we'll move on and we'll let Matt introduce himself for those of you that maybe haven't. So if you can go, there you go. So Matt, you want to pitch in on yourself, and then I'll go back to me.
Sure, I'll be a little more short and sweet, just because I haven't had as much traveling as Ray has. But I think this is the third time I've talked to this group. I'm a nuclear engineer by education. Started my career at Mare Island Naval Shipyard, working on Navy nuclear propulsion plants for a number of years. That particular shipyard was shut down, so I came to Hanford in '94. I've been here at Hanford, pretty much worked at every facility at Hanford at one time or another. Joined the waste treatment and a mobilization plant team 7 years ago with a focus of getting the plant started up. And we'll be talking about some of that exciting startup here when I get back to my slides here in a few minutes. But thanks for inviting me, and I'll hand it back to Ray, and he can get us going. Thanks.
You're muted, Ray.
Hey, Ray, you're still muted.
Yep, good. Thank you. Yep, sorry. I'll start again. So of course, the Hanford site mission, it's vast. We just hosted the Assistant Secretary for Environmental Management, Tim Walsh, last week. Actually got him out to the site, and we actually traversed pretty much the entire site. And he left here just absolutely amazed at just how big and how vast the site is, and how many structures and how much there really is going on out here at Hanford. And it is a lot to take in when you first see it. So, of course, the biggest thing we need to do is make sure we deliver safe and secure operations. We need to make sure that every day what we do, people come to work, they do what they need to do, and then they go home the same way as when they came to work in the morning. And that's the paramount thing under which we operate. Of course, the 800-pound gorilla is the tank waste. So that's our big push right now. Our big initiative is to really dig into that tank waste program and start making some things happen. And of course, you all know of the recent success with the LAW. Matt will talk about that a lot. And so now that we got that stood up and running, now it's time to see where we go from here. And we got a lot of initiatives that we're cooking that'll help move that mission along. Of course, we have a lot of aging structures. We've torn down a bunch of them, but there's definitely hundreds of them left, and some of them are in better shape than others. And so we're going through and kind of cataloging them and taking down the ones that are the biggest threat, and making sure we stabilize the ones that can last a little while and don't really pose any threats. A lot of remediation work's been done. You'll see that on the next slide. We got groundwater. That's something else. I know we've done a lot of groundwater treatment. We'll have some stats on that here in a minute. And then the infrastructure. I know this says right size the infrastructure, but that's kind of an interesting way to phrase it. What it is just trying to keep making the infrastructure functional. A lot of the infrastructure we have, some of it dates back as 75 years ago when this site was very first built. So we're constantly, wrestling with things that are failing on us. We're trying to get, money where we can to put into key infrastructure upgrades. We just put a new water treatment plant together, and we're getting ready to put that online anytime now. So we're making investments where we can to make sure that the infrastructure stays stable and functional so we can do the mission that we need to do. Our team focus areas, again, obviously, as I said, the health and safety of the workforce is paramount. We got to make sure everybody stays safe every day, no matter what they're doing. Interestingly, this operations-based culture, you'd think that's a given, right? Well, so for a long time, it wasn't that way. It was kind of a surveillance and maintenance culture. And, now that we have this melter going and it's a 24/7 operation, we've stood up a bunch of the other support operations to match that 24/7 operation. And it's a very different culture and a very different mindset going to that. And so that's something we've been really working on, and I think we're making good progress with. Being a fair and demanding customer, and that's something, it's an interesting switch for me because I've always been on the other side of this as a contractor employee. So I know all their tricks. So I'm going to be able to be even more demanding, but also fair too. But I intend to be very demanding because we have a lot to do, and we need these contractors to really tighten their bootstraps and really get working on this stuff. And definitely we need to work on our relationships with our stakeholders. We need to make sure we're communicating, that we need to make sure that we can gain alignment on what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. We're all here for the same purpose. We're all, just want to get this job done. We just want to clean up this site in the best and the safest and the most efficient way possible. So I think we'll have a lot of chance to have dialogue on that and try to come to common terms on what we're trying to do and how we're going to do it and why that's what makes the most sense to do. And then just teamwork from there. Teamwork is really essential. So next slide, please. So this is actually, I guess, some recent numbers. We've updated it here, starting up at the top left and going across and down. So I guess you probably all know the 9 reactors, 7 cocooned and 1 that's now a national monument, or I think it's a national monument, a historic monument or whatever. And we got 1 more reactor to get cocooned, and that was my reactor, the K West reactor. So, and I think that's how to be one of our highlight projects, and that's one I'm going to push for to get completed in the next 3 to 4 years, let's say. That'll be a push, but that's a stretch goal that I intend to go put out there. As far as the groundwater I talked about, you can see the statistics there. 37 billion gallons of groundwater we've treated and 683 tons of contaminants removed from the groundwater. Those are like staggering numbers. They're almost hard to conceive. Volumes and masses of materials that have been handled. If you get out and around the site, you'll see black hoses of all kinds of sizes and diameters just draped for miles and miles across the site, bringing water in from various wells and bringing it into the treatment center that we have over in the 200 West area. Amazing project in its breadth and how much is involved in that. 19.1 million tons of soil have been moved to the Erdif landfill. That's a lot of remediation work, a lot of demolition work. And, you know, that goes to the slide below it, 983 different facilities demolished, and those facilities all, for the most part, wind up in that Erdif landfill. So, you know, I was out at 100K and we dug, I can't even remember how many hundreds of tons of material we had to dig out of a remediation site there. So just a lot of remediation work. You know, some of this remediation work we've had to literally dig down to the groundwater level, 60 feet down, just to be able to get the whole source term out. So big operations trying to make that happen. And Erdif is a huge benefit for making that happen. Underground waste tanks retrieved. As you know, we've got a lot of them, 22 of them done now at this point, working on a 23rd currently. Expect to have that done within the next little while, I think the next few months or so, and we're getting ready to do the 24th one after that. But we're really hamstrung on double shell tank space right now. And so that is a problem that we have as far as doing these tank retrievals. So the LAW facility, now that that's up and operational, that's taken a lot of material from the tank space, from the AP 106 tank, where we've staged the pre-treated feed to be fed to the LAW vitrification plant. So that'll help free up tank space so that we can make more pre-treated material out of one of the other double shell tanks, so we can create room there that we can retrieve more waste out of single shell tanks and get it into double shell tanks. So that's helpful. We've also run an evaporator. As a matter of fact, ran quite a few a couple of really successful campaigns this year and generated, I think, 1 million gallons worth of space from those campaigns, if I remember right. So that's another option that we have. Right now we're actually shut down with that evaporator because we're doing some retooling of the boiler tubes in it. We expect to get that back operational again sometime next year. And then, of course, waste sites remediated, 1,000 waste sites remediated, you know, some bigger than others. That one you're looking at there in the picture, that's a pretty big one. So lots of material has been dug up and sites cleaned up and waste moved over into the Erdif cell where it can be properly and safely managed. And then finally, a good segue point here, 832,000 gallons of tank waste ready for immobilization in glass, sitting in what we call the AP 106 tank, one of our 1 million gallon underground double wall storage tanks that is specifically set aside to gather the pre-treated feed that will feed the melter process that Matt Irwin has been in charge of for the last, how many years, Matt?
7 years. Well, I've been in charge for 2 years. I'm sorry. On it for 7, in charge for 2.
So with that, without further ado, let me turn it over to Matt.
All right. Thanks, Ray. So a number of you have probably seen this slide before. This is the kind of the big picture slide of the direct feed low activity waste program. And in the past, we've shown it to show the complexity of each of the prime contractors doing their part to make this project successful. The exciting part about today is all of that is currently in operation. So everything on this picture is now being used, and we're making glass and putting it in containers. So if we start at the top, just as a reminder for those of you who's already seen it, in the goldenrod, that's the AP tank farm. That's what Ray alluded to, AP 106, and the tank side cesium removal system are in that farm. We started with 840,000 gallons, as Ray's talked, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've taken so far. The orange line shows how that waste travels the path to get to the low activity waste facility, which is in the middle of the slide. We have transferred about 40,000 gallons so far. The white line is our secondary liquid waste. So we have a number of cooling systems that cool our off gas, which is our ventilation system. And that secondary waste is then put through an evaporator, and that condensate follows the white line down to the liquid effluent retention facility. We've made 2 transfers back to that facility, and we're working on sampling for the third. So that's part of the process. The effluent management facility and its evaporator, that's here in the purple. On the lower, or dark blue, I guess, I'm sorry, dark blue in the lower right corner. That facility is, the evaporator is running, and it's supporting the low activity waste facility. I'm going to talk about numbers here in a minute, but the low activity waste is right in the center, and that's the heart of the DFLAW program. And we have up in the upper left-hand corner, the purple integrated disposal facility. We have shipped our first 2 full containers of glass from low activity waste to IDF. That happened here a couple of weeks ago, but I'll talk in more detail when we go to the next slide. So this is just the big picture showing how each of the contractors, the tank farms contractor, our Central Plateau contractor, our waste treatment plant contractor, and then it isn't shown explicitly in this, but our mission support contractor provides the electricity, the water, the emergency management, the IT, and all of the support. So all of those are working together today now. As Ray pointed out, it's a 24/7 operation. It's taken us a while to get there, but it is all working in unison today. So if we can skip to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about the path that got there. If we start in the upper left-hand corner, this would have been in late summer over at Tank Farms. They hooked up the jumper pipes for AP 106. So that was to officially put our piping system in line so that we could receive waste from AP 106. In parallel with that, if we move over to the right here, the melter 1 and 2 operations, we did extensive commissioning testing of the melters. They've both been hot for multiple years, and we've been pouring from them for a while with commissioning feed. The single biggest test that we did here in the late summer, early fall was what's called the environmental performance demonstration test. That is when we push the melters to their maximum capacity, both in feed rate, ventilation system, everything trying to operate at the maximum. And then we injected additional challenging chemicals into the ventilation system to prove that the ventilation system would actually abate those various chemical constituents. That test was supposed to be performed at the 99.99% level. We actually, for both melters, tested out at the 99.997 level. So we're almost an order of magnitude above our requirements for the various chemicals that got injected. They were injected at the maximum level we would expect for this facility. So this is far more than what we would see on a routine basis. And that ventilation system worked amazingly well. What this picture is showing you, if you haven't seen it before, on the left side, that gold line, that's actually a melt pour in progress. And that is showing each melter has 2, if someone could check their mute there. Each melter has 2 discharge chambers. This is showing a west discharge chamber that's pouring and an east discharge chamber that's not. The top picture is literally just a camera. And then the bottom picture, where you see the reds and blues, that's an infrared camera, and that's looking at the top of the container. It has a special emissivity strip where when the container gets filled with hot glass, that strip, you can actually monitor the level. We used multiple ways. One is that level indication. The other is the weight of the container. And that's how we know when a container is getting close to full. So once we finish that testing that I talked about, the environmental performance demonstration test, then we worked with Washington Department of Ecology, who has worked hand in hand with us to make sure that we do all of that testing, that we push the plant to the maximum extent possible, and validated that it does what it was designed to do. Then they gave us our temporary authorization to go start radiological ops. So here in the lower left-hand corner, actually started on October 8th when we took the first batch of waste from tank farms over to the waste treatment plant. We brought over up to today about 40,000 gallons, treated just over half of that. This says 10,000, but we're well above that now. We started on October 11th in Melter 1. We did the first 10 containers over an 8-day period. We call that our sprint run. So for each melter, part of the testing sequence was once we went hot, each melter had to run 10 containers to prove that it's operating effectively. And that also adds the rad feed. So now it's all rad feed and the glass formers in the melter once you get past the 10th container. So for Melter 1, we did that between October 11th and the 18th. We filled those 10 containers. And as I pointed out before, the first 2 were shipped to the integrated disposal facility. Today, we are working on Melter 2. We're on container 5 as of 6 o'clock this morning. I expect by this late weekend or early next week, we'll finish the 10th container on Melter 2. Once we've done those 2 steps, then our goal is optimizing the production of glass, and that's trying to run both melters sequentially, prove that we can do that as effectively and as optimized as we can, and then also start to get back into running both melters together. I would tell you, for me personally, I'm not sure we'll run both melters together a lot, because I think we're going to actually get higher productivity on cycling them, because we can get a higher feed rate out of a single melter by itself than we can both melters together. But we're going to continue to challenge that. We'll do some additional testing as we go along the way. The other great part about being in melter operations today is, instead of having modeling data for how all the rad constituents behave, for example, how much of it goes into the glass, we're getting real data. And all that data to date has been extremely favorable. Then the last picture here, those are pictures in the lower right-hand corner. Those are the overpacks. So the container you see in the lower left side goes into one of those overpacks, gets put on the back of a truck. And the first 2 containers, as I mentioned before, were shipped between the waste treatment and mobilization plant and the integrated disposal facility. We have 13 others as of this morning that are in varying stages of the process, and we'll be getting in a nice rhythm of shipping them over to IDF as well. We can go to the next slide. So Ray already mentioned it, but there's the front side of this equation, which is making sure that we have pre-treated tank waste feed. And as he pointed out, when we started, we were at 832,000. Like I said, we've pulled approximately 4 out of AP 106 as of this morning. We'll be taking another 10 to 20 out over the next week as we continue to make glass. But the tank side cesium removal system, that is how we process the waste from AP 107 over to AP 106 so that it's pre-treated. There's a campaign that's ongoing. It started last week. So that system is adding 7,200 gallons per day to AP 106. As of this morning, it had added about 45,000 gallons, and it'll continue and do nominally about 200,000 gallons total to the tank. So we'll go from just under 800,000 to just under 1 million over the next 30 days. The race, as I've talked about it with my team, both the Tank Farms team and the WTP team, the race is running TSCR as much as we can to keep AP 106 as full as we possibly can, and optimizing running the low activity waste facility to vitrify that feed as fast as we can to lower the tank. So, in my perfect world, that will be a race that maximizes our pre-treatment of waste, and allows us to gain additional double shell tank space, which then allows us, that last bullet here about tank retrieval progress, that's what allows us to have double shell tank space for us to go do retrievals. A101 finished its limits of technology here a month and a half ago. Right now we're in the documentation of validating that it is complete. A102 retrieval started again last week. As of this morning, it was 27% retrieved, with another transfer expected to happen today, so that number will go up. And we'll work on getting through A102 retrieval As Ray pointed out, we then also have to make waste transfers between double shell tanks to free up space, because just on the heels of A102, we'll be going into A106 retrieval here later in 2026. So the good news is we are in a rhythm now where we're making glass, we're freeing up double shell tank space, and that facilitates our ability to continue our retrieval and make progress on the overall tank waste mission. So I believe I've covered all the slides I needed to. So that was our material. As I pointed out, and I don't think I can stress this enough, we're in an extremely exciting time period where all of the pieces are working in unison, and we're just looking to accelerate each of those machines to free up our space as quickly as we can. So I'll hand it back to Ray, and then we can open up from here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, just entertain any questions that y'all might have.
Excuse me. Thank you, gentlemen. Mike? What lessons have you learned from the operation with radioactives? In particular, where is the technetium ending up?
I can answer that one. So
Well, you
far
can.
so far the rad on the outside of the containers is nominally between 5 and 7 millirem per hour on contact. The technetium is just barely above detectable, which is well below what the models indicated it would be. The cesium is also quite a bit lower than was projected in the models, as well as iodine. The one isotope, and it's not above what was projected, but it's when you take those other ones and they're lower than they would expected. The isotope today that looks like it's the I'm going to put in quotes the highest one, because it's not higher than what was projected. It's just higher than the other three I just mentioned, is carbon-14. So all of them are favorable. All of our sampling of our secondary liquids were also well below the limits. The acetonitrile, which was something that was concerned about, that's not a rad condition, but a chemical one, is almost, well, more than 30 times below its limit. So all the data we have so far is favorable. Now, to be fair, we do expect some of those numbers will come up a little bit more the longer we run rad material through the facility. But so far, all of the levels are extremely low, which means it's mostly going into the glass, which is what we would hope for it to be. And then the other variable I will say is we have had a few small leaks on mechanical connections. They were identified by our radiological surveillances, which is a good thing. That means our system was working, and we've made the minor repairs on those particular components, and the system's working well. So, and then a big picture lessons learned. I know you didn't ask for it, but we have identified over 600 lessons learned in the building and commissioning of the law facility that we are applying to the high-level waste facility.
Thank you, Matt. Mark Gamba, you have a question?
I do, thanks. And this is a question probably coming out of ignorance, or maybe I misunderstood what you said, but it was my understanding that the melters needed to operate continuously, otherwise they basically get clogged up. And I thought in your presentation you were saying that you're potentially going to be looking at operating them on and off, not operating both of them simultaneously. So I probably missed something, but I'd love to understand.
That's a great question. So both of the melters have to stay hot. The terminology we use now is they stay hot and they're either idle or they're being fed. So when I say operating, I mean we won't feed both of them at the same time continuously over long periods of time. We'll feed one while one is idle, and then we'll bump up and feed the other one while the other one's idle. That'll allow us to do maintenance on the one that's idle while the one that's operating is being fed. So it's my use of terminology, so I apologize. Both of them are always kept hot and they are always, quote, operating, but they aren't always being fed with new material and making glass. Does that help?
Yep, totally helps. Thank you.
Yep, good question. Thank you.
So a question for Ray, could you comment on the impact of the shutdown on Hanford's operation and funding?
It's mostly been an impact on our psyche. So, I mean, we've been, doing everything we can to scrape, look under the pillows and behind the seat cushions for change. And we've been able to scrape together enough to keep everything moving. So it hasn't really been an issue. We haven't had any interruption. It's been a lot of planning, a lot of talking, a lot of wringing of hands. But at the 11th hour, we've always been able to find a pot of money that, would sustain the contractors in our operation for another couple of weeks. So we've been in a situation where we would have been able to last this out through Thanksgiving, even if it weren't to have stopped. So while there was a lot of hand wringing and a lot of planning and worrying, we had very little effect on our ability to actually conduct business.
Are there any strategic changes in direction that you see on the horizon for Hanford?
So the next thing that we need to do now is get that whole the holistic agreement functioning, and that's going to be our biggest focus going forward. Now that we've got the DF Law melter up and running, of course there's still work to do there. Matt's talked about we got to get some optimization of the operation going there. We've got to, we're retooling the feed system to put a better feed system in there that'll greatly make that process more effective, more efficient. So that's an upgrade to the process that's going to happen in the next couple of months. But that whole West area project, that's a big project. Right now we don't have any of the infrastructure needed over at the West area to do any of the retrieval operation. So we're basically just starting from, a brownfield, and we're going to have to go build the infrastructure, like we have in the East area, which we've been building for years to do all those retrievals. So that'll be a huge change. The other big change that we're going to stand up is our transuranic waste shipping. The WIP site has been busy with the Idaho site mainly. Idaho had, thousands of cubic meters of true waste there. And so they've been the number one customer to WIP for the last decade or more even. They're basically done now. And so WIPS needs to, have the next site spool up, and that'll be us. So they're counting on us to stand up our transuranic waste program. We've been in consultation with WIP. We've had the WIP field office manager and some of his support team come up here and visit and talk with our folks. So we're actively working those platforms we need to certify the waste to get it acceptable for disposal at WIP. We're working on the mobile loading platform that we'll need to be able to load the true packs. So I've challenged the CPCC contractor to, I want to see the first WIP shipment on the road by the end of this fiscal year. So they're working on that hard. And then from there, we'll start gaining some momentum. And hopefully within the next 2 years, you'll see a whole stream of trucks leaving here with true packs on them, getting rid of all that true waste, which is a big deal because that waste has been sitting there for a long time. And we did a bunch of movement of it recently because we had to get rid of wooden pallets because a lot of them were sitting on wooden pallets and it was a fire issue. And as we were moving them around, we found a lot of drums are starting to fail. And so we're having some small contamination leaks that we're having to deal with. And so we just got to get that stuff out of here. So those will be the two big efforts that you'll see coming out of Hanford in the next little while.
Okay, Esteban.
Yes, I think this is the questions for Ray, because we've been through Brian Vance, I forget the other guy's
Right.
name, Brian. And then now you, and one of the big things I think you stood out said, relationship with stakeholders and teamwork. And to educate more than anything, the public about the work going in, like with everything, I think, and we got the political folks about funding. What would you say would stand out when it comes to that about educating and relationship with stakeholders about the current and all the work that's happening?
I just think we gotta talk, right? We just gotta communicate, honestly what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it. And, we'd love to have anybody who wants to come see, the vastness of Hanford and the challenge that we have here. I'd encourage you to, we'll welcome anybody to come visit. We'll tour you around. So yeah, I look forward to meeting with you folks on a regular basis, answering what questions you have, telling you what our plans are, and we'll just stay in touch.
Jim.
Yeah, I had a quick question relative to the true waste or transuranic. We went down and toured the website, but it's a little concerning that US DOE is considering contracting with private entities, right, to turn excess plutonium into reactor fuel. And that's going to create a lot more true waste, which is going to directly, conflict with your mission a little bit. Are you concerned at all?
I would say no, because I don't really know what exactly other things are going on. I think, if there are efforts to start reprocessing certain fuels, that would generate secondary waste that would have to be managed for sure. And I can't comment on what those volumes would look like. I do know that WIP has a pretty significant capacity to handle materials. They've Idaho, between Idaho and them, they got together. They were doing 17 shipments a week, I think, or something like that. And so that's going to be a challenge for us to even get to that level of shipments. It's going to take us a while to be able to meet that. So I don't think we'll run into a problem with capacity at WIP. But I guess we'll learn more as things unfold. Not only that, if there are these other commercial operations that are going to stand up to try to reprocess, fuels, it'll take them some time to get operational too. So I don't know if that's a good answer. If that's as best as I can answer it at this point.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Tom Cecilia.
Thanks for the presentation. It's nice to meet you virtually. Just wondering if there's any update on the when the cesium and strontium capsules are going to start getting transferred from WESF.
Good point. We did. It started. I forgot to mention that, but yes, just this last week, we got the first group of capsules out and into their, I can't remember what they call it, the little tube that they put them in. And so we've removed the first set of capsules out of the pool into the tubes, and we're getting ready to stick them from the tubes into the conveyance and out to the shield. So we're underway.
Excellent. Lots of progress.
Yeah, that is. Thank you for asking that question, because that's that's kind of gotten lost in all the fanfare of the law plant, right? That's another big initiative that's been 10 years in the making, getting ready to move those capsules. So that's a huge thing too. Thanks for bringing that up.
No problem. Thanks, Ray. This is Max Woods, Department of Energy, Oregon Department of Energy. All this is like great progress. The WESF project, by the way, just for everybody's reminders, the pools, we see kind of the blue glow out of the what's it called? The Chernoff effect? Cherenkov effect. That's a huge risk reduction effort. So we're glad to see that happening. I was just gonna make a note on the true waste shipment. And if there is a thought to accelerate shipment, there's work in stakeholder engagement and training of first responders along the route. Some emergency happen before we as a state would be comfortable with that happening. I have our emergency responder from Umatilla County right here. And we just want to make sure everybody is ready to handle safe transportation of true waste when it's time is right.
Absolutely. 100%. I worked on some of that stuff at Rocky Flats because nothing was disposed of at Rocky Flats. Everything had to be shipped away. And we went to a rail shipping campaign for low level waste. And I went on a barnstorming tour where I went through all the different states and places where the trains were going to run and stuff. So yeah, I'm fully familiar how we need to do that kind of outreach, and you guys need to be prepared. And so, yeah, you'll be seeing that from us for sure.
That's great. Thanks. Rep. Levy. Go ahead, please.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm not here in person or there in person. Had a procedure on my eye and can't drive. So I really appreciate that, Raymond. So it's really important, like you said, of keeping us up to date on the rail system, because we have a couple of bottlenecks in my district that are pretty severe. And that's due to they're going through the community of Stanfield and the community of Echo, and they notoriously block those lines. You can't get over the lines to go. There's a school district on the opposite side of the lines on the the east side of the line. And so on both communities. And so we complain about that all the time to Union Pacific Railroad and to the other ones about going through there and just stopping and blocking the safety of that. So you need to be aware that we have that huge problem. And I do believe it funnels over into the Pendleton community as well when they go through there, and funnels through. We have a farm, a pretty large farm out at Nolan, Oregon, and it stops and blocks both of those pathways as well for trucks to go through and that kind of stuff. And last year or a couple years ago, we had a death because of one of those blockages. And so we need to take into consideration where they stop the train to allow for other trains to go within the Hinkle yard. So
Okay.
just be aware of that.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's a shame. I mean, it seems like that the railroad would be a little bit more helpful for the communities, you'd think, but I'm sorry to hear that, especially since it took somebody's life. That's terrible.
Yeah, it just happened to be an employee of our son's. Yeah, because
my-
he does custom harvesting. Not a good deal at all. Yeah. Thank you very much for doing that.
Sage DeLong.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here and just thinking about, as an emergency manager for Umatilla County, I like to hear that, the barn shop and going around and doing that. I would just want to ensure that I know that we're starting the campaign in here in Oregon, but just to ensure that if there's any help, different emergency managers or your staff that could teach us something or help us better prepare for these things, I'd welcome that, not just as a board member, but as a Umatilla County emergency manager to aid and assist us in, making sure that the citizens and everybody, as this waste travels from Washington through Oregon, that we would be prepared for those shipments, and any kind of resources or staff time that you could help with that. I really appreciate that. So.
How often does this group meet? Just
Three
quarterly?
times a year. About 3 times a year for this board member getting together, but we can always, I think for the true waste shipments in particular, we'll be thinking about it as much about the board as about the local communities that need to be ready and trained. This board represents the state, but it's more specific and local. Umatilla County, Union County, Baker County, Malheur County, maybe Morrow. Does the roads might go through here too? It's 5 counties, transportation safety. If you're traveling the freeway route from Hanford to, I guess, the Idaho border. So those are the locations that we need to work on, making sure that communities, first responders, hospitals are ready for shipping of radioactive waste.
Yeah, understood. My only thought was that we could, the next meeting, we could make transuranic waste a topic and we can talk about what we're doing and we can talk about outreach and how we're going to do that. If that sounds like a good topic for you guys.
That's a good idea. I like that idea. We can do that.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. Time to move on to the next topic on the agenda, which is Ryan and Stephanie from the Washington Department of Ecology.
You guys need a few minutes.
Colleagues, thank you for joining today. I know this was been a lot happening at the federal government level, shall we say. I appreciate you making the time, showing up here, having a slideshow. I know that took some effort, so thanks to all involved. Rich, thanks for pulling this together.
Yeah, like I said, I've only been working here for like just over 2 months, but it feels like 2 years. So
We appreciate the candor and detail and specifics in your answers. That's
Oh, thank
very
you.
polite.
Thank you.
Max, before we go any further, do we get a copy of these slides so that we can have them today or tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
Really this morning, Rep. Leda, that these slides from DOE were cleared to be presented. So this is an hour ago or so, they told us we could present everything. Yeah, but it's all good. We'll have it all posted as soon as we can and shared with the board. Right?
Take it away.
Yeah, Stephanie, take us away.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting us back to give you an update from Department of Ecology on what we've been working on for the last few months. I'm equally pleased that Department of Energy was able to come be here as well, give their perspective on the progress that's happening at the site, because much of what I'm going to cover is very similar to what you heard Department of Energy say. And I think really just shows that we're on the same trajectory when it comes to the Hanford cleanup, even amongst all of the changes and whether it's in personnel or in administration that's happening, we continue to progress the mission in alignment, and that is our goal. I've been with you before. I'm the Nuclear Waste Program Manager at Washington State Department of Ecology. The Nuclear Waste Program oversees the state side of the Hanford environmental cleanup of the tri-party agreement that dictates the level of cleanup that needs to happen at the Hanford site. You want to go to the next slide, talk a little bit about what I'll cover today. I'll kick it off on the outreach and education efforts that our team led by Ryan has been doing. Talk about an ongoing tri-party agreement negotiation and what the next steps are for that. We'll also touch on low activity waste facility or lot commissioning, upcoming public involvement activities, and then we'll end talking about the Hanford site-wide permit update. And then there'll be time for any questions that you have for us. Go to the next slide. So this dovetails perfectly into one of the questions that was asked of Department of Energy when they were providing their presentation, highlighting the importance of outreach and education. And I'll just say for the state, we have a dedicated team that does our outreach and education. Again, that's led by Ryan Miller, who's with you there in the room, who is our communication manager. We have two folks in particular that really lead our outreach and education efforts, and multiple folks that help join in and support those efforts, folks across our program who volunteer to support efforts as they get scheduled. You'll see here that there have been 16 recent events that have reached over 1,500 people that have visited to learn about Hanford, learn about the state's mission overseeing the Hanford cleanup, the progress. All of this is really key. I'll just emphasize that Governor Ferguson, Washington State Governor Ferguson, and our director have made it clear that a priority for the state, for our agency, is reaching back into the communities that we serve on decisions that we issue, educating them, making sure we're doing our jobs and being good servants. So really just want to commend Ryan and his team for the fantastic work that they do getting out into the community and reaching as many people as possible. I'll also highlight a couple of upcoming events that they have that are planned. And again, just offer, if you know of anyone who is interested in us coming and talking about the Hanford cleanup, educating them on what Hanford is, priorities, any of that, you can always reach out to us and send requests to hanford@ecy.wa.gov, which is here on the slide. And you should have a copy of these to hand out as well if you forget. Go to the next slide for me, please, Ryan. Thank you. So one update that you requested that we talk about, and I believe I've spoke about this before, is an update to a milestone series that's again in the tri-party agreement that governs the Hanford site cleanup. Those are milestone series M15, M16, M85. We call these the soil facility groundwater cleanup milestones. These govern essentially the rest of the cleanup outside of what was covered under the holistic negotiations that was tank farm cleanup specific. Back in December of 2024, we signed an agreement in principle with the tri-parties, with Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency to negotiate these milestones. We also put milestones in the series in abeyance, which means they weren't going to come due while we were going through the process of negotiating updates to these milestones. We have ended that negotiation and signed a tentative agreement for revision to these milestones. We did that on October 24th. The tentative agreement, along with the draft milestones that we negotiated, are anticipated to go out for public comment next month in December. And you might have saw that the 30-day pre-notice went out, I believe it was Monday of this week, announcing the upcoming comment period. And I believe it's supposed to run for 60 days. And then I do want to also mention that tribal consultation is also being offered to the 3 federally recognized tribes that we work with on the Hanford cleanup. You want to go to the next slide? So I know Department of Energy spoke a lot about this and did a really great job getting into detail, but the state also played a key role in supporting and driving the significant achievement of getting tank waste treated into a safe form for the first time in decades. And speaking of it from the legal obligation lens, so the state of Washington has a court-ordered consent decree with the Department of Energy. For us, an additional reason why this milestone was so significant is Department of Energy met their consent decree obligation to the state of Washington to have the low activity waste facility commissioned and be making glass of adequate quality of tank waste by October 15th. They achieved that. You might have seen news releases that we issued announcing that on October 15th. They have made 14 containers of tank waste so far, of glass so far, all slated to be disposed of at the permitted integrated disposal facility. You heard Matt say that a couple of canisters have been shipped. The state continues to work through environmental testing. Environmental testing and permits have been issued for Melter 2, and we'll be working with Department of Energy on environmental testing for dual melters operating at the same time in the near future as well. Both melters now have proven that they can operate and produce tank waste, and our team remains out in the field supporting those activities and issuing permits the Department of Energy needs to keep the facility in operation. About 42,000 gallons of glass has been vitrified to date. About 25,000 of that is tank waste that has been turned into glass. Secondary waste streams are being sent to the liquid effluent retention and effluent treatment facility for treatment. All of that's going well, and the feed from AP 106 into the facility is also going well. One other thing that I'll highlight, and I think Matt touched on this as well in his presentation, but what we're seeing is that glass as it's being treated is being loaded at a percentage higher than what is anticipated for the beginning stages of the facility. That is very good news, and we're also seeing a higher than anticipated throughput of the facility. The consent decree that we have with Department of Energy does require throughput within 3 years. Department of Energy needs to achieve 70% total operating efficiency of the low activity waste facility and a rolling average of 21 metric tons per day. And Department of Energy is seeing right now that that shouldn't be too far of a reach for them to accomplish within 3 years. Ryan, if you want to go to the next slide. Wanted to just provide an update on, and you heard Ray mention this in his topics, the West Area Risk Mitigation Project. This is the project that, we love our acronyms at Hanford, so it's fondly called WARM. But what this is it really covers the retrieval of low activity waste in the 200 West area of the Hanford site, those tank farms, and treatment of that waste and subsequent offsite disposal of that waste. Department of Energy end of this year under Holistic has a milestone to make an alternative treatment decision on where that waste is going to be grouted by the end of this year, December 31st. Once Department of Energy makes that decision, that will tell us what permits they might need from us, depending on the location of the grouting facility, if that's on the Hanford site or within the state of Washington. Other permitted facilities and adjustments will be needed regardless of the location of grout. And we have been working proactively with Department of Energy on some of those discussions already. Load in, load out areas that might be needed, an AMPS layout very similar to what is happening in the 200 East area of the site. And we do expect that we might even see an initial permit application from the Department of Energy even sometime next year. Continuing on to the next slide, Ryan, and talking about upcoming public involvement opportunities. Majority of these are tentative. As everyone knows, things have been a little up in the air as it relates to schedules with things that have been happening with the government shutdown and other items. but we do anticipate a few opportunities for public comment coming up. One, I mentioned that is the proposed new tri-party agreement milestones, or the adaptive milestone series, that we anticipate going out for public comment for those soil, facility, and groundwater cleanup milestones. We tentatively have that public comment period slated for December 10th through February 8th, with the public meeting on January 13th. The tri-party agreement has a public involvement survey that will be going out for public comment beginning of the year. And then also majoritarily overlapping, we also have Energy will be hosting a 5-year plan public comment period with a presentation or public meeting scheduled for January 14th. You want to go to the next slide? And I believe this is my last slide before I jump into questions. Wanted to provide an update on where we're at for the Hanford site permit renewal status. We continue to inch closer and closer to completing that renewal and getting it out for public comment. The last time I was with you, I provided a status that we had 33 of the 52 unit groups complete. That number has now increased to 39. I'm very excited to say. We also want to acknowledge that it is taking us longer to complete the renewal than what we anticipated, but we are working very hard to close out the remaining 13 unit groups and get that into what we call permit production to get out for that 120-day public comment period. We have seen substantial progress though, and we are very, very close to being able to tell you the specific dates that we're going to put the permit out for public comment. My team has been working on setting those dates, and we do anticipate hopefully being able to share those very soon with you. I will say, though, you may have heard me say either at this board meeting or the Hanford Advisory Board meeting that we were planning on sending the renewal out for public comment in 2025. Now we're in the middle of November. I can for sure say that the renewal is not going to go out for public comment in 2025. It will be in 2026 when we come back and announce the dates for that. I think that takes me to my last slide and any questions that you have for Ryan and I.
Just an
Okay, repeat yourself now. Oh, you were muted.
I was muted. Hi, Stephanie, Jeff Wyatt here. Could you give us an overview of this waste incidental to reprocessing, the WIR determination, who makes it, why it's important, and what the impact would be on the Hanford cleanup?
Well, I'm not our expert on WIR. I feel like some of the Oregon folks that are in the WIR room might be able to speak about the WIR in more detail than me. I can talk about the status of the waste incidental reprocessing for the 200 West Area Risk Mitigation Project. We continue to ask Department of Energy about the status for where that is, and I think folks are still on the line, but I believe that's still going through the headquarters approval process. It does get posted to the Federal Register, and we'll have a public comment period associated with it. But it's also my understanding that that document going out for public comment is not a holdup for Department of Energy being able to make their end of year decision on grout either. But when it comes to, the WIR and the legality of that, I'm wondering if someone in the room wants to talk about that. I don't think I have Suzanne on, who would be the best person to tackle that on my side.
Here, a test of knowledge. Speak to waste incidental to reprocessing. I will try, and Matt and Tom, Cecilia, maybe you can help me. By law, Hanford tank waste can only be treated and disposed of in one way, vitrification. The waste incidental to reprocessing is a technical and legal review that could result in a determination that the tank waste does not need to be turned into glass and vitrified. And as the alternative, it could be treated with grout or solidified with other means and disposed of in a shallow repository, meaning not a deep geologic repository, which doesn't exist, but rather a shallow landfill, which in this case would likely be in either Utah or Texas offsite. But the WIR is the process, WIR, waste incidental to reprocessing, wieldy acronym, is the process by which that review, both from a scientific and legal process, occurs. Yeah, Matt?
It's a fairly extensive process. where there's criteria that we have to meet to make this judgment, to make this legal. One criterion is that you have to remove key radionuclides. That's part of the importance of the TSCA process. It's taking out the cesium from a lot of this stuff. That's why it's used for the West Area project. Whether you're using TSCA there, it takes the cesium out, it's key radionuclide. The other criterion is showing that it can be disposed of at that child burial site. That's criterion 2. They don't meet performance objectives for those sites and performance assessments. You do that by showing that it can meet a different standard that grouting can do, so it doesn't have to be vitrified. And the final criterion is that the wastes have to be managed a certain way. That they'll be managed as low level waste, that they can't exceed certain criteria. They all come together to give DOE the potential option to handle this waste in a legally different manner.
Yeah, as not high level.
As not high level
Yeah.
waste, low activity waste.
Thanks for adding the criteria in there too. I appreciate that, Mike. Cecilia, anything else that we missed on that you want to add? Anything there?
Yeah, so the weir just determines that the key radionuclides have been removed to the extent practicable, that the waste is a solid form and that it can be safely disposed. So the models on the landfill have to be included as well. So those are the 3 criteria that Matt was talking about.
Thanks, Tom. And just for reminding anybody who's listening in and in the room, Oregon strongly opposes shipping of liquid Hanford tank waste through our state. And the solidification process we strongly support should occur at the Hanford site, or at least in the state of Washington, before it comes indoors.
Yeah.
If you want to do it in Richland, okay. But before it comes into Oregon, that's where our interest lies. I think that's about, do you have a question?
Yeah, so thanks, Stephanie, and I know I got Ryan here, and now being on the Oregon side, it was good to hear that Governor Ferguson is supporting, the outreach and education efforts, and like Sage said, I think this is a whole teamwork effort, right? What would you have to say, or what would you require, or what teamwork of the state of Oregon, when it comes to all this process on your, cooperation and supporting, the counties involved in these routes?
Ryan, I don't want to talk over you. Were you going to talk? You want me to go
I was
first?
doing the same. Waiting for you to go first, then I'll follow up.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, well, so, I would echo a lot of what Ray said and Department of Energy said. I think, we are always happy to come to the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board meeting, and really appreciate, Max reaching out and highlighting a couple of areas for us that the board would really be interested hearing from, so we can make sure that, what we're coming and speaking to you about are areas of interest, and we can make sure that we are being as transparent as possible about what we're working on, state's position of, decisions, upcoming decisions, priorities for the Hanford site. We also have an MOU with the state of Oregon that we meet, once a month to talk about what is going on, if there's any significant issues that we need to be working on together. I know that we each had folks last week at the National Transportation Stakeholders Forum and the Western Interstate Energy Board. There was a lot of conversation preparing for the upcoming transportation planning for the resumption of transuranic waste shipments. And there will be a plan around that. And communities in Oregon, that route is defined. Communities in Oregon, responders along the route. It's my understanding that Department of Energy for the waste isolation pilot plant will be coming out and doing a roadshow as it relates to that. And again, engaging with Oregon Department of Energy, with everyone along the route is something that is of importance. And it's something that I think has been done successfully before with our agency. So I think all of that, and then anything in addition, welcome feedback on if there are areas where you want to hear from us, or things that we're putting out for public comments, and you have concerns. We are always open for trying to improve our engagement with your board, with the state of Oregon, with the communities as well.
Mike Freeman has a question.
I like what you just said. There is a move asking the NRC to reconsider its radiation exposure limits and to promulgate changes throughout the entire new radiation exposure body of regulation. Has the state of Washington started to look at the implications? Should those changes be adopted?
So I think the state agency that likely would oversee that is the Washington State Department of Health. At Washington State Department of Ecology, we oversee the hazardous component of waste. The radioactive material piece of waste is overseen by Washington State Department of Health. So likely, if you're talking about a piece of legislation and whether we would have comments on it, it likely would be through government relations through Department of Health.
This is a response to a series of executive orders where again, the NRC is as the lead agency been asked to examine whether existing limits are too low, and in particular, whether the ALARA, the as low as reasonably achievable, is a sensible regulation or not. And it seems to us it would have dramatic impact on the quality of the eventual cleanup of Hanford.
I myself am not aware of this. You know, we do partner with Department of Health, who again, you know, oversees even at the Hanford site, the radioactive pieces of cleanup, whether it's radioactive emissions, radioactive Department of Energy themselves implement the radioactive material piece under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. So I'm not exactly sure. That might be a question for Department of Energy, how they're going to implement that proposal. But I can also take it back and see if it's something that Department of Health is tracking.
Okay.
So I may have missed the question, but can you restate it? Maybe I can see if I can tell you anything of any benefit. I think I know what you're asking, but
Back in July, the NRC held a public meeting in response to an executive order, I believe it's 14300, asking that the NRC specifically look at how it establishes radiation exposure limits. In particular, there is some scientific controversy over whether radiation has a bad effect on you, even if it's at low levels. The recommendations are, at least as proposed by the Idaho National Laboratory, which you're familiar with, that the ALARA component be removed from restrictions. In other words, instead of working to continually reduce exposure to employees, that as long as it's below 5,000 millirem per year, that's good enough, so don't worry about it. Concomitant with that is the EPA requirements, looking at limiting exposure to the public. Currently, it's set at 25 or 100, depending upon context, and proposing that be raised to 500. Just a very wide range of implications for our businesses we're going to touch on later. And it just raises a lot of questions to our mind.
And I think we just view this as an emerging issue in this field that could impact certainly worker safety and health, but also perhaps cleanup standards for what goes into landfills, what's acceptable, and also in transportation. And we just, at this point, don't know what the impacts would be or could be.
Yeah, and I'll have to say, I don't either. I am aware of the executive order and I know it's making its way through the department chains. And I know that in order to study it right now, and they've proposed raising some of those limits that have been, set exceedingly lower over time. There's decades of statistical, scientific evidence on radiation exposures and health effects and all that stuff. I'm in no way prepared to speak on any of that in any way. I do know that at the NRC at one time, when they actually defined ALERA, they defined ALERA in $1 per REM basis. And then you can go back and you can go find this document that was done sometime in the last century. Their determination was if it cost more than $2,000 to save one REM, then that was not reasonable any longer, which is pretty significantly a small amount of dollar value for a savings of a REM. I'll tell you, at the DOE, we go way, way, way beyond $2,000 to save a REM. And so the question is how far do you have to go and how much do you have to spend, to go from somebody to have a 20 millirem exposure for a year to a 10 millirem exposure for a year, right? Is it worth $1 million to do that? Especially in the budget picture that we have, going on currently in this country. So these are all questions that are going to have to, be addressed and sorted out. It'll certainly be, the workforce will have significant questions if we start trying to tell them, last year we told you we needed to make it more safe for you. This year we're telling you, you know what, never mind. We're back again on that, right? So that'll be a challenge just in and of itself if that's where we go. So there's a lot to be done there. I will tell you though, my personal belief is we have driven it to a very extreme amount of money spent for a very infinitesimal gain in safety. And that's my personal belief, but, so hopefully that helps, but I think more will unfold as we go.
That does help, and thank you again for your clear response.
I wanted to thank Ray. Thanks for jumping in there. Thanks, Mike, for your work. We'll hear a little bit more about that later in board business. And Stephanie, I think on this issue, you mentioned Department of Health, Washington State Department of Health, Oregon Health Authority is also our state's lead in this issue. Radiation Protection Services is their division. We, of course, work very closely with them. I think perhaps after this meeting, we may want to connect between our two states just to make sure that we're all tracking the NRC's rulemaking and what the consequences could be for the whole, scope of work that we all work on. Our team is not just about Hanford safety, it's also about radioactive waste disposal in the state of Oregon. So we have a whole host of things that we need to pay attention to the NRC rulemaking for various reasons. I think we'll connect there.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie, circling back to the permit, which is how many pages is this going to be? 10,000?
20,000.
Double that, yeah, around 20,000.
Would you give us any counsel on what the more controversial sections of that should be, or what perhaps we should be focusing our efforts on in terms of reviewing and commenting on it?
So maybe I'll start off with Ryan. I know you have been talking to our permitting team to prepare for that public comment and the public comment period, and you're thinking about the best way to, help the public in their review of a document of this size and complexity. Do you want to cover that? And then I can cover, more specifics of areas that I think might be of interest.
Yeah, and I'll dovetail and finish some comments you had on the public involvement question, since there was another question that got asked before I had a chance to respond. And in addition to what Stephanie said, like I said, we've got the outreach and education work that we're doing, and separately from that, concurrently we have the public involvement piece on like comment periods and permits and that kind of work. And I just wanted to highlight that we're trying to work closer with Oregon on like public involvement planning. Like I know I've reached out to you guys, and I've talked to the board several times before, the Oregon board, on like our Rev 9 planning and trying to solicit feedback for locations on meetings and stuff, and continue to do that. So folks do have recommendations on like meeting venues and feedback on like our plan on public involvement. Please let me know. And we're always looking for feedback, and we'll continue to connect as we get closer to that. On the Rev 9 specifically, I know like I said, I've presented a few times to the board before on some of what we're planning for Rev 9A, but we're planning One, we're planning several like advance notices. So typically, one of the agencies or the agencies would do like a 30-day pre-notice. We're trying to do a lot further out in advance than that, as far out as we can to provide a heads up on the dates, which Stephanie talked about earlier, that we're getting close to finalizing the dates for the comment period so we can start socializing it early and often. And then we are planning a whole host of a combination of public meetings and public hearings, some of which we're hoping to start like before the comment period starts, maybe more like educational sessions on just the permit in general, maybe some specific pieces of it. And then of course, as the comment period's underway, doing more of the public hearing to get more of the formal kind of testimony and comments and stuff on said permit. And so looking to just continue to do a lot of
Like a hearing style, where we'd actually could get up there and give you live testimony.
Yeah, exactly. I'll hold up like the little timers and all that fun stuff. So
I think the nervousness, Ryan, is that it's just such an overwhelming volume of material, right? And even for, our team, professionally staffed, tons of experience, and, we'll be able to manage, but so many organizations just won't have the resources to get into them. So I just encourage you that your summary documents and all your presentation materials, do the best you can to help us understand where we should pay attention to and what the issues are. And
that's
that type of.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're going to have like a web page that's dedicated to this. And I've talked a few times to the board too, that we're developing like a set of what we call baseball cards, which takes that 20,000 pages and condenses it to 52 baseball, like PowerPoint slides to talk about each unit at a high level. So we're doing a lot of things like that. Obviously, like you said, our presentation, we're going to try and focus on some of the more key aspects and then maybe also just focus on here's what's different from 2012 to now, rather than trying to, bite off the whole entire thing. Of course, if you want to read the whole thing, you're more than welcome to, but.
Yeah, I also might just want accessibility for the, think about multiple languages. I think something like that, which probably the permit document is so consequential for the site. Having material that's available perhaps in Spanish or other accessible formats would be pretty important.
Yeah, I think, we're looking into seeing what we can and can't do for that. I know we're looking to see what's feasible to translate versus not, like probably be hard for us to go and translate 20,000 pages, but if we
at
get
least some accessibility.
we're looking
for people to get into that material.
Yeah, like our whole comps team is still looking at that and still working on finalizing things. So we're still a work in progress, but again, the feedback's super appreciated. If you guys have more, please send it my way. Stephanie, is that a good segue into the more specific stuff you were going to talk about?
Yes, that was great, Ryan. Thank you. So as you can tell, Ryan has been delving into with the whole team the best way to strategically plan how to put the permit out for public comment. As I mentioned, I know it's going to be a strain on resources. It's been a strain on our resources to just get it ready and out for public comment again. I will say that when you're thinking about areas to focus on, many of the units that are going into the site-wide permit are units that are being or have been recently modified. New facilities or facilities that have been requested by Department of Energy to be modified to support operations. So chances are you may be reviewed the exact same thing that's going out for public comment for Rev 9 that you reviewed as a permit modification. So I would put that lower on your list of priority for review and instead focus on something that has not been modified under the current configuration that is out in our current permit that we call 8C right now. There will be new units going into the permit that will have updates like the single shell tank unit group, the double shell tank unit group. There will be solid waste operations complex permits that are under consent order going into Rev 9. The 324 permit will be rolling over into Rev 9A as well. So I would encourage you to, if you really need to look at where to dedicate your resources, if it's a unit that's been modified relatively recently, and on our webpage we have all of the public comment periods and historical comment periods. If you can't remember, if you reviewed it, you could go there, take a look. And if it was modified recently and you commented on it, you looked at it, then I would put that low on your list of priority and instead focus on something that's new coming into Rev 9 that you have not commented on as part of a change. So hopefully that combined response helps. But more to come on this. This won't be the only time we do coaching and education on how to comment for Rev 9. There will be many more conversations where we can talk about this.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Stephanie or Ryan, I had a quick question. I think the comment period on the 324 building, I want to say ended in August, yes? And so DOE EPA, and correct me if I'm wrong, will be digging through the comments, and I assume ecology will be as well. And so where are we at in that process?
So that was not on the permit document. That was on the amended record of decision proposed plan, I believe, for the 324 building that was led by Department of Energy and EPA. So unless someone from Department of Energy wants to comment on that right now, I don't have a response for that. That's not being led by our agency. It is something that we're tracking. We submitted a comment ourselves. And I'm not sure where in the process that is, though. That would be up to Energy or EPA to respond to.
But ecology doesn't pour through the comments as well.
Well, like Stephanie said, this comment period was led by DOE and EPA. It wasn't a TPA one. I mean, we certainly support some of the work on it, but like Stephanie said, it was a effort that was led by Energy and EPA. And yeah, EPA is the regulatory lead.
Cecilia, would you care to comment on that?
Yeah,
324 bill?
I can jump in. I had some email exchanges last week with EPA. They have not seen the final record of decision yet in their local office. And it has to go through the local office before it goes to EPA headquarters. So it's not going to be something that's happening very quickly, in my opinion. And then I lost my train of thought for the rest of it. So but yeah, that's the main moral of the story is I wouldn't expect it this month.
Okay, any other questions?
Stephanie, did I hear you say that it was 25,000 gallons of waste resulted in 42,000 gallons of glass?
Go back and look at my notes. So I have about 42,000 gallons has been vitrified and about 25,000 gallons of tank waste has been turned to glass. So of that glass, 25,000 is tank waste.
Thank you.
Very good.
Any other comments or questions?
Matt, do you have something?
Matt?
I do, while we still have Ray Geimer online and Stephanie. I did notice some of the milestones have a slight slippage, couple months it's looking like. How are the milestones affecting 200 West looking? Those are high in my mind. Are we expecting?
Did you hear that, Stephanie? And Matt, you're a little distant from our mic. His question was around milestones, potential slippage of milestones, particularly on 200 West holistics. And if there's been any conversation yet, I would guess due to the shutdown, there, that would be the sort of the impetus or the rationale for potential extension of the timeline. Has that conversation come up now that we're 12 hours since the federal government has reopened? It's time to get back to work.
I have not heard that Department of Energy has had a slippage in the 200 West or in the December 31st milestone. We haven't had that discussion, so I don't know, Ray, if you have anything, Ray or Rich or anyone at Department of Energy want to comment on that. The only milestones I'm aware of that are, in abeyance pending negotiation are the soil facility groundwater milestones that I spoke about, where we have a tentative agreement that's going out for public comment.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any milestone slippage. Certainly not due to the shutdown, because the shutdown hasn't impacted us. So I'm not aware of anything that's slipping. So certainly not with regard to 2 West. We're on top of the 2 West stuff for sure. 200 West, sorry.
To follow up, Ray and Stephanie, has DOE released the RFP that was expected to go out to solicit contractor services to handle grouting at the site or off the site transportation? The 200 Waste contract, I guess, is what we've been thinking about it. We understood an RFP was coming out this fall. Guess we haven't really tracked that closely. And it's not that the state of Oregon doesn't necessarily, the RFP itself isn't the thing. It's really about the information you would get from that RFP that helps you make a decision, I would assume, when you make a milestone choice at the end of the year on where to grout that waste and how to transport it to disposal locations in Utah and Texas.
Yeah, so that RFP is still under development. We expect to have that out within the next couple of weeks. So it's going through the final phases of putting the finishing touches on it. So we're close to issuing that.
Would you delay that decision on the end of the calendar year choice without that, is that a key decisions document that you need to make the choice on where to solidify tank waste and how to transport it offsite without the information you'll get from the bidders in that RFP? I'm probably put you on the spot here. That's kind of a detailed question, but it strikes me as.
It is, I guess, and this is something that Steffi and I, we were going to get ready to speak on, perhaps even next week, is, what is the expectation with regard to the December 31st first deliverable? We did the NEPA document that outlined our approach for West area, and we've believed that that's what outlines our approach that meets the criteria of that milestone. But that's a conversation that we need to have to see. Because I think you're right. Yes, until we need these subcontractors that are going to supply the service to put, serious thought into these proposals that they're going to develop. That could take months to get solid proposals that we can compare and, be able to make a rational choice, a best choice for everybody involved. It's a very, we're advertising as a $4 billion procurement, right? The number of, that's how big the effort is for as long as it is. So we're going to make sure we do it correctly. It's a 15-year contract for whoever's going to win it. So anyway, that's kind of a long answer I think we've done what we believe that we need to meet the current milestone, but there's a lot more thinking to go before we really solidify plans, if I could use a pun.
I just grounded in Hanford. We'll all be good, right? It's all right.
I hear you. Yeah, we're not making any predeterminations at this point, but I understand your all's concerns. So,
thank you.
Okay. Anything else for ecology? Brian, Stephanie, thank you very much.
Absolutely. And thank you to Ray for hanging on and helping me answer questions. Thank you, everyone, again.
One last question, Stephanie, was that background, was that Switzerland perchance?
It was.
Urine down there in the bottom, they live down. Yeah, okay.
Yep, you must have been there. That's exactly where I was.
Yeah. Okay, thanks again.
Thank you.
Do you guys wanna?
We can push up, let's take a 10-minute break.
Okay. We are going to take a 10-minute break now and reconvene with Odo.
I stole my thunder. Guard.
Now we are.
Okay, thank you. We're reconvening the meeting. This is the Oregon Department of Energy update section. And before we get started, we have a guest, Jessica Keys. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Hey, sure. You need me to, you can hear me okay? Hi, I'm Jessica Keys. I work for US Senator Jeff Merkley. I've known Steve since I worked for Congressman David Wu way back then. I actually used to be on the Hanford Cleanup Board when I worked for Governor Kulingoski, and now cover Eastern Oregon for Jeff Merkley, so US Senator Jeff Merkley. But that's about me. But what's more important is I've been working with Max to get up to speed on a lot of the issues you guys have been working on. And Senator Merkley, along with Senator Wyden, are sending a letter tomorrow in support of the state's position here in Oregon, opposing the transport of liquid hazardous waste through Oregon. See a handshake over there. And actually, I just need to change who the letter's going to, because I learned today that there's no longer an acting assistant secretary, but there's an actual assistant secretary in there. So we're going to update that and get that out and make sure you all have copies of that. So thanks for letting me sit in and listen, and I'll stick around for a little bit longer.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
Thanks to the senator for supporting.
Jessica, can you put an addendum on that letter to not lower the risk level of exposure?
What we were talking about, the NRC stuff?
Yes.
I think that's the next phase.
Well, yeah,
Let's
let's talk about that for another time, Jim. But yeah, thanks for raising that though.
Okay, Max.
Okay, we are going right into Odo staff presentations. Matt Hendrickson, you're up.
Okay, well, we've, don't worry, I won't start yet. I'll talk for a little bit till the slides come up. Turn my camera on just in case people want to see my smiling face before I get feed in. So, no, that's Mark's section. Well, that is interesting.
We'll take a quick break, and Matt, why don't you go ahead and pull it up from your computer?
Yeah, I'm working on pulling it up.
Maybe just a note on the schedule. People may have realized we put out an addendum to the schedule, the agenda today. Initially, while planning this meeting, we weren't sure that DOE was going to be able to join. And so we were sort of kind of thinking how to have the meeting during the shutdown. DOE may or might join. So we pulled out a good agenda, and then DOE was able to join. So we made some space for him. So hope everybody can, bear with us on a meeting that threw in perhaps agenda items a little longer. But I think the time and the dedication here is worth it to get all the content information, get up to speed. So thanks for what is now a little bit longer and dense agenda. Wanted to make space for everybody that we had capacity.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and present from my computer. I just gotta find it. Nope. And hopefully this will show for everybody. There we go. So, it's interesting that the conversation naturally evolved to the 200 West program. And as you know, a little while back was the draft supplemental analysis for 200 West DOE release. And we've had a lot of conversations here about that. And Oregon has had some pretty strong opinions. So let's do a little bit of background first.
Matt, could you either, I think the audio is hard to pick up. The projector voice.
Well, I can turn this way and talk, in a conference-like manner. Okay. How's that looking for you?
Well, it's Cecilia's online. We'll see if he can get our audio check. He says better.
Okay, clear for Liz. So Liz is important. I'll take her word for it here. So it's important to talk about what this project was, and it is, they're going to start opening up the 200 West area. And it's far away from the current treatment plant. So we talked about how important it is today to get that glass going. That glass is in 200 East. It's several miles away from 200 West. So if we take a look at this slide, all the way on that far left side is you have the S, X, and U farms, which is where the Warm West Area Risk Management Project is going to go to. And this project is slated to retrieve 22 single shell tanks that are under the ground over there, starting with the SX tanks, if I'm not mistaken. And take that material, treat it and remove cesium and some of the solids with an advanced TISCR system called AMPS, so Advanced Modular Pretreatment System. I believe they're putting AMPS in over there. And then with that material, either to grout it on site or ship it as a liquid to be grouted at 2 disposal sites in other states in the nation. One is in Clive, Utah. That's the Energy Solutions Facility. And the other is in Andrews, Texas. That's Waste Control Specialists. Andrews, Texas can take all their different types of waste. Class A, which is the lowest level. Class B, the next highest. And then Class C waste, the highest material that they can accept. The facility in Utah can only accept Class A though. So this 200 West supplemental analysis, they did this to look at the environmental impact of this proposal. And they believe and still do, even after the final essay came out. So I don't know how many of you folks know this, but the final supplemental analysis did come out. There was no announcement about it that I know of, even for individuals and groups that commented, including us and OHCB. It was released on the Hanford EIS webpage for 0391, their tank waste EIS page. So it caught me by surprise because while I have fun every Monday trolling the administrative record, it wasn't on the administrative record. I had to be informed by some folks out there that, hey, by the way, they released the final for this. So it caught me by a bit of surprise. So there's the location and what Warm's going to be. And I have to admit that the final material was very much similar to the draft analysis. They maintain that their analysis is sufficient and that they don't have to do a full environmental impact statement for this project. So there's the location. We covered that before in the layout. In the letter we submitted, there were multiple entities that also submitted from Oregon. I want to say the number was 38 comments were submitted, including ours, rather, and the governor supported our letter, in which we had some issues with the draft supplemental analysis and how it was performed. There was a reliance on old, and perhaps you would have to stretch to say that they were applicable in this case. There was reliance on the system-wide, DOE system-wide environmental impact statement. So not only waste from Hanford, but from places like Paducah or Savannah River or Los Alamos, all over the place. So they said that was kind of what they relied on for their volume, saying that this is less than that volume. There was materials from the secondary waste EIS, which is the material that after it's been processed through the DFLAW system, the direct feed low activity waste, that secondary waste, there will be material that needs to be grouted, and sent offsite for disposal. So similar process to what they're envisioning for this. That's why they use that. There was also the whole tank waste EIS that was covered. So you took all these together and you made they made a document that said this supplemental analysis, because this falls within these bounding characteristics of all these EISs, we don't need to do an EIS for this project. But we did have concerns about that reliance. We had concerns about the appropriateness and that the transportation risk in particular hadn't been properly assessed. And that we wanted more clarity on the routes, and that NEPA has a very defined public interaction that you have to do for a lot of these events. And I personally applaud, and we also thanked DOE for still making public presentations available in conjunction with Washington Ecology, and that they actually put this information out there. But I think part of the way that this kind of got released to no fanfare, kind of a surprise, was because there's no defined method for them to have public interaction in this essay. It was a complimentary thing they did by allowing us a comment period. So we had these concerns. Now, here's two of our main concerns raised. A lot of words on this, I know. Unanalyzed impacts on national infrastructure. So this material is going to 2 sites, and they're the only 2 commercial sites out there. So unless another one gets formed or made, this is going to take up a significant fraction of their grouting capability if shipped as liquid. In the best case scenario, the best case, there's 123%. That means you'd have 23% more capacity to take care of the rest of the material out there. That's including secondary grouted waste. That's including private industry. That's including Savannah River. And any other place that's doing the want to ship liquid waste to be grouted. You only have a small fraction. That represents 230,000 gallons, because we're looking at approximately 2.9 million gallons a year having to be grouted offsite. Worst case scenario is you fall short by 14%. So what are you going to do with that extra 280,000 gallons? Stakeholder concerns. Again, the DOE reiterated its commitment to engaging with stakeholders, and they did for this. But I think we see part of the flaw in their approach in doing this as an essay, in that even commenters and people very interested didn't know that this had happened or this had been posted, this final essay. Next, there's all Fonzie. So that's DOE Fonzie. That's a finding of no significant impact. And that happens, for materials like environmental analysis. Maybe it's under it. There's an unprecedented scale. Again, this is only when you include the entire umbrella of the DOE complex would this scale be appropriate. It is well over 50, almost 50 times the amount of secondary waste that they are considering. And it's 14,000 times, over 14,000 times bigger than TBI, the test bed initiative, which they also used as one of their supporting documents. And inadequate transportation risk analysis. There was some more information included from the Savannah River system. And I want to go into that in a little more depth. So if you look at this kind of process that they're planning to do at Savannah River, it's very similar to what would be our secondary waste at Hanford. This material is going through the defense waste processing facility. And then some of those leachates and a waste that comes out from their evaporators and such like that, it can't really be put back into that system, has to be grouted for offsite disposal. And what they cited was work from Savannah River. There was 10,000 gallons of this waste. How it is similar to what's going to be sent from Hanford is that it is high pH. So the Hanford waste is a mixed low-level waste. In essence, that means it has a hazardous waste constituent and the radioactive constituent. In this case, the hazardous waste at a minimum will be the sodium hydroxide if shipped as liquid. This material, Savannah River, is also pH of 12.5, right on the edge of being a DOT Class 8 hazard. Where it's a little different is that it has a cesium activity in 230 gallons. It was about 100 times higher. So what they had to do for the Savannah River waste, the way they analyzed their accident, did their accident comparison and analysis, was they put it in category A containers, or type A containers. Those are very robust packaging. They're not quite the type B that you may have seen strapped onto a rocket train and rammed into a concrete wall at Los Alamos, but it's the next level down from that. Type A containers, unlike the IP2 shipping containers, which the Hanford will be having done, type A containers are a lot more robust. They have to survive a 30-foot fall test, not just a 1-foot fall test. They have to survive a 6-kilogram bar penetration test, where you ram the bar into it and not get penetrated. They also tend to be double layered, so you'll have the outer containment and the inner containment. Industrial packaging type 2 is a little more robust than type 1, but it only has to survive in this case, it'd be a 1-foot drop test. It doesn't have to survive other penetration tests. But if it's a liquid, it does have to survive a certain pressure test. So in my opinion, while they use the Savannah River test to justify that they've done an appropriate accident analysis, I'm not sure that it lives up to exactly what they're going to do at Hanford. So again, it's another example of trying to include something that is slightly related, tangential, but under this umbrella of protection, saying we don't need an EIS. Again, transportation's still up in the air. I hand drew that red line, which is the UP line, the Union Pacific main line. That wasn't analyzed in some of this material that was done earlier by the FFRDC, Federal Facilities Research Development Center report. And there is a non-zero potential for accidents and fatalities with this material. I am still of the opinion that solid form is the better way to transport. Even the Savannah River study cites and does their analysis based off of liquids, because the accident scenario, if everything gets aerosolized, and they're very conservative, and if an accident happened at Savannah River, they assume all of it would become aerosolized. But again, it's very much focused on the radioactive hazard rather than the chemical hazard of the material. I have been looking out very closely for the RFP, as Max had mentioned earlier today. I haven't seen it yet, so that does cause me pause, but I am very reassured to hear Mr. Geimer say that they haven't experienced slippages in the milestones. So I am very highly anticipating seeing the milestone M6264 come out at the end of this year, where DOE makes some of these decisions on their path for scheduling and permitting. Okay, that's it for me. And then how about some questions before we invite Mark up?
So Matt, assuming that there was an entity out there that could be a environmental group, city, a county, or a state who objected to this supplemental analysis, the findings of the supplemental analysis, and how it was going to be implemented, what legal, or at what point would lawyers get involved, and what would be the avenues for challenging that decision?
Well, I have not slept at a Holiday Inn. Is it Holiday Inn? And I am not a lawyer. I would say that the more you have to stretch and take related things and bring it into one, the harder it might be to justify legal. The further in the past things get, the less applicable they might be. The lack of at least the defined public interaction and outreach might be an avenue. My understanding, again, I'm not a lawyer, is I believe the Administrative Policies Act has a statute of limitations of 6 years. If that is applicable in this case or not, I will again leave it to those of us out there that are esquires to decide.
I will just say that there, Matt, you may not be a lawyer, but you adequately portray the opportunity here. The procedural steps under NEPA is what I believe the legal risk to DOE, I guess, as you might put it, is really where that lies. It's NEPA is a funny law, right? It's sort of a informational requirement. NEPA is required to provide, adequate information on environmental risks to federal government decision makers, and then that information is supposed to be used in when a decision is made, but it is not in itself a decision, which is why the NEPA process can be concluded, and DOE has, as we discussed, has not made a decision. They have not made a decision on where to grout the 200 West tank waste or how to ship it. As Matt, I think, rightly points out in his presentation on previous material, the lack of adequate information in that NEPA review, in the body of work that's been presented by DOE, we made that very clear in our comments and presentations, and we stand by it. But really, I think the risk is on, or the opportunity, perhaps my friend at the opposite side, is on the procedural steps under NEPA.
Yeah.
But it is something that is under advisement, shall I say.
Questions from Tom and from Mr. Bobby.
Yeah, who's up? Tom?
Tom Cecilia?
Yeah, I just wanted to tie this into something we heard a little bit ago. A lot of this conversation has been very arm wavy. DOE will either ship a solid or a liquid, and they haven't announced what the transportation route's going to be. And a lot of us are waiting for this December 31st milestone, which is supposed to be when that information is presented. But I think I heard the site manager a little bit ago say that they don't think they have to produce any more information than what they've already done to meet that milestone. So that I think is a little concerning that we might not get any more information before things come out. So just something to pay attention to there.
You're right, Tom. And maybe just even one more follow-up. Matt, you were pointing out the use of a NEPA review from Savannah Riverside. So for context, Savannah Riverside is similar to the Hanford site. It's often called the sister site to Hanford. It's smaller, but nevertheless has plenty of liquid tank waste of its own. But I understand they didn't do a route specific analysis there either. And that's part of the challenge here is, it's all well and good to have some of these lab conditions of packaging and risk. But when you're actually driving up the Blue Mountains in Northeast Oregon in the winter, shipping tank loads of liquid radioactive waste, that is a very specific hazard that I don't think has been adequately addressed. That's the one.
So on that note, that what Tom said, and before I came out to the Pacific Northwest, I was working for a science organization. And the big thing when this administration that's when I was there, was that there was a lot of wording that was being taken out and where I was going up with the scientists and the experts. And like the big thing that I'm pointing out as a conflict and as the red flags, like you said, there's all these red flags that lacking information. So the big thing is that, right? Where do you think right now, especially because, hey, you need the information to make the decision, right? What's the biggest things that you say, like your top three? And I know I'm glad Ryan's still here, but like with the tripartite agreement, but what's the big things that you say, like, hey, this is what
the transportation route, that is critical. And my understanding is that transportation routing and analysis is done under a whole body. So that is still open. So they want to keep that flexibility. That is key to pretty much all of Oregon's concerns. We need to know there are economic analyses that I can't perform because some of this material was labeled as business sensitive. That there's Tom used the term armlet. There is a statement in these analysis that says, yeah, sure, we can route up to 2 million gallons of material in Texas. Is that true? How likely is that? Do you have to have this contract in place before they decide to up their capacity if it's there? That's another one. What is the practical permitted or physical allowances for that? The third, a lot of it comes back to ground, but the third is public participation and interaction. The communities along these routes, the chosen routes, need to be ahead of the game. I applaud what they've done. We talked about True and maybe accelerating the True mission. They've done a lot of work with the road shows, demonstrating how safely packed some of this True stuff is. But it's important not to equivocate, but make sure that is not equal to the type of packaging and the type of material that's going to be going down the road, at least under the current 200 West proposal. And I'd really like to see an honest assessment of what percent's going to Utah, because that is more likely to go through Oregon, and what percent is really going to go to Texas.
So Matt, the bottom line at this particular point in time is that the shipment of liquid radioactive waste through Oregon communities like Bend and Klamath Falls is still in play.
It's an unknown,
Yeah.
depending on the route that's chosen. And I'll try and touch on that a little bit, Mike.
I will say that I do see, now this is just me reading, I see some language within the draft, or excuse me, the final essay that leads me to think that DOE is very strongly considering, and that's as far as I'll go, strongly considering grouting on site. But they are trying to keep their options open as best as possible. I hate to make it an analogy for a game people might not have played, but it's a little bit like poker. Are you going to give away your hand and what you're going to do before people bid on this process type of thing. You know, you want to keep maximum flexibility. If I'm the person trying to make these decisions, I want to be as flexible as possible. And I also see a lot of that language, that hedging, that of statements within it. So it's very hard to pin down. It has not been eliminated. Shipment of liquid radioactive waste is still being treated as an option. And I would say mixed waste in particular, liquid mixed.
Matt, it's possible, it's even possible that the proposal could come that the liquid waste would be shipped while the grouting facilities are under construction at Hanford. And I think that's a possibility that we've maybe hadn't even talked about, but that sort of parallel path might be proposed.
And in a case like that, then you are very interested in the tank sequencing, because then you can get a better idea of at least a relative risk level when you look at the contents of each individual tank, which is going to change over time.
Yeah, Matt, I need a little bit of clarification maybe, and then a brief question or show my ignorance relative to it is, this morning earlier we were talking about the true waste. The true waste will be trucked as opposed to this, which will potentially be on rail. And the sites right now, or the routes, are through Central Oregon or through Spokane. And lastly, my question is we're making glass up there. Why aren't we considering this with the stuff out of the 200 West?
Well, let me start with the first. It's still being considered for either truck or rail. My understanding for the 200 West project, the true packs are primarily trucks. And they are a different packing style and type. Very, very rugged, very robust packing for transuranic material to meet the acceptance criteria in transportation at risk. Why isn't this material? Well, for now, it might still be vitrified until waste incidental to reprocessing. That weird process happens. But they don't have the cross-site transfer line is not in operation. So you'd have to find a way to get it from 200 West over to the treatment facility. The treatment facility has been designed to, as we were talking about earlier, how they're talking about total operating efficiency and how much waste they're processing per glass. It has been designed to a certain throughput. They're expecting a certain volume to go through, and that volume isn't here. There is also still the theory that grouting the material will cost less than vitrifying. And that is another economic reason why they're looking at this type of process. So it's physical location and economics and the overall trying to accelerate that desire for not only DOE, but Washington and us to accelerate this mission. How do we make it?
And the routing is Central Oregon or Spokane.
Also Northeast Oregon, freeway route under consideration. The I-84 route.
Oh, yeah, for the trucking, yes, but I'm talking the rail.
That is part of the problem of the materials that we don't have. We don't know. We're
waiting for that decision before any other planning gets done, and that's the problem is, what are you guys gonna do? Because if it's gonna go liquid, it's not coming. If it's gonna go grouted, then you engage the other planning partners, including the railroad, to say, it's gonna go on a commodity load, where are you gonna pick it up and where's it gonna go? We're not there yet, because we're all waiting to see what this decision is.
Matt, would you mind putting your map back up and just so people can see and understand what
Can we wait until we get into mine a little bit so I can talk a little bit about that?
So Mark will talk about it a little bit, but again, I talked about how this is a problem with the lack of transportation route analysis that we just don't have in this essay. We don't know which way it's going. This map came out of the FFRDC report. This did not come from DOE. Well, it came from a DOE child, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
FFRDC. But, there's also, it wasn't even analyzed, this UP line. Why wasn't that analyzed? For some of this material. A lot of those questions aren't still unanswered. Sage, I'm sorry, Sage.
I think we discussed this last time. I had to look it up just to make sure, but the Supreme Court case with 7 County v. Eagle County is relatively new.
It is.
And essentially, from my understanding, is that it lowers the threshold of NEPA to not have to look at the downstream effects of, let's say, transporting this waste. And I'm relatively new to this, so given the timeline and everything, from what I can see is that even if grouting were to occur on site, the time constraint of that, and knowing that would they have to do another NEPA analysis to even put a grouting facility there? Would it be faster if they tried to transport it and didn't have to, via the Supreme Court ruling, transport the waste and have it done somewhere else, so that it, not saying they're trying to pass the buck, but it negates the fact that they would have to go through all of that new analysis on site rather than transporting it and not having to deal with the downstream effects, the analysis and everything. And that's my first kind of point.
I'll address that in a second. The 7 counties, again, this is not Esquire Hendrickson. I'm not a lawyer. I've never passed a bar. This is not an indirect impact on the downstream facilities. This material will take a fair percentage of the disposal space, depending on what the ratios are, where it goes. And it will take more, a majority of the capacity for grouting material shipped to the that's a direct impact. That is not indirect as in, you have an air basin. If I ship this oil to this refinery, how much is that going in the air basin? So I'm seeing it more as a direct impact that should be analyzed, and historically NEPA has done transportation. If this is, I hope this isn't a case to test my theory, because again, I've not gone to law school. My understanding too is that a grouting facility, the size and nature that they would need there, would not be considered I don't believe it'd be considered a major construction project. There are also alternative purchasing agreements that DOE can do for such a facility. But again, that's me sitting in the chair of DOE, which I'm not. I don't believe it would rise to a NEPA analysis in Washington, but ecology might be able to clarify that.
Yeah, I think the difference, and say it's a good point, and I think you're exactly right. I think in my mind is that the transportation is the project. Like that's the proposed action. It's the transportation of waste offsite for disposal. And so by that, our whole argument is that it needs to be included in that type of environmental review, and DOE disagrees.
And their argument is, well, it's not on the facility, it's being transported.
Well, it's not necessarily, they didn't really rely upon that 7 counties decision, which I think actually came out after.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it's not really about that case. It's really that they say they've already considered the impacts and they've disclosed them in previous NEPA documents. It's that they're relying on the body of work that's been done previously for both the Hanford site and national transportation of radioactive waste. That was done in 1997, which may have been before you were born.
Hey. Come on.
Sorry, excuse me.
A year after I was born.
Max showed us his poker hand.
I know, I did it right. Anyway, it's that what DOE considers is that they've already met the requirements of NEPA by previous documentation, and that therefore no additional work has been done.
Yeah, and then I think my second point is, you're talking about these drop tests.
Sure.
How many ravines do we have that would be transported through that would have the ability to drop 1 foot, 50 feet, 300, 500 feet? And has that, I haven't looked through this, was that a point of contention amongst these transportation routes, is that they actually looked at the routes and the elevation that they would be traveling on?
No, not really, and I can speak to that a little bit.
I'll
because-
shut up.
They look at the radiological dose profile of urban, suburban, type areas, but it's very, very focused on the radiological aspect.
The shipping containers themselves, by classification, there's US DOT regulations. When you talk about like type A containers, and they talk about all the things that they're subjected to be able to be classified as type A, fire, drop, submersion, all of that. Within the transportation planning phase, DOE reminds us, hey, we're gonna use this container and this, everything. You can go online, you can actually see the test where they fire it across and it blows through things and all of that. So depending on the type of containers, they're DOT approved to go on the road by the material that's in it and what they're designed to contain. True packs are gonna do for true. You're gonna have the gondola cars. If you're moving the Trojan waste, it's gotta go on specific things. And all those have to be subject to different tests. They don't just go to a contractor, and say, off the shelf, what have you got? It has to go that. It's a different set of standards. So DOE and their Office of Transportation will always reiterate to the planning group, this is what container it's gonna go in. And they allow the states to push back and say, no, it needs to be in an A or a B, or it needs to be in this type of container or cask.
Mark, I don't know if it was chips are real quick. Was one of the questions that they're relying too much on contractors? I don't know what your thoughts are on them.
Well, let me come back to that. Tom's got a question real quick. He's got his hands up, so I want to get that before we get going.
So yeah, real quick, they did cite the 7 counties decision in their response to comments. So I encourage you to look at that. And then as far as whether they would need a NEPA analysis for a batch plant on site, one thing that DOE did with one of the transuranic handling facilities that they are building is they relied on the fact that they're building on a disturbed parcel. So the damage has already been done, so they don't need a new NEPA evaluation.
Thanks, Tom. That's good context.
Matt, are you able to advance my slides? Okay.
I can. Tim, did you have a question? You can raise your hand.
Just a clarifying question. Do they have to grout the waste before it goes into WIP, no matter what?
Well, WIP is not where that's gonna go.
Sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Oregon has said it's not coming into Oregon unless it's ground.
sure. But no matter what, they have to grout it
Yes.
eventually before it goes into storage. Okay.
And I have a really interest. Can Oregon say that and they can't ship it, or can they, if Oregon says no, can they still somehow
No,
push it through?
no.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
federal, I don't think that we have, as a state government, the authority to stop a federal shipments on federal highways. To be.
But it wouldn't be pretty.
Okay. I've never asked that question, so I didn't know if the board, the governor and everybody was like, don't do this.
I would say, and your office would also be involved to say no, because I can tell you when we'll talk about with the grouting and the rail movement, that Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation were the first one to step up and say, it's not coming down 84 unless it's grouted. They were the first. And then we came in behind and said, you're absolutely right. It's not coming in here unless it's grouted. That's why on the test bed initiative, that 2,000 gallons went away from Oregon. That's why it went there.
Currently, there's a moratorium on moving any radioactive material through Oregon.
No, there's radioactive material running, uranium hexafluoride runs up and down 84 every month. There's moratorium on storing anything and creating new radiological, but you can safely move that and things are moving through the state. But I'll get into that in a second.
Okay.
Can everyone hear me okay and everybody online hear me okay? Okay, I'm gonna have Matt advance. So thank you, everybody. I just want to reiterate that the 5 of us that work with you and work on Hanford issues all wear a few hats. There's 6 on our team, including Tracy Nail, who's the other emergency manager on our team, who does the petroleum emergency preparedness and also the energy security. But the 5 of us not only are your staff, but we all have lead roles, other jobs that we do full-time. So my job is the radiological emergency preparedness program and the radiological material, the placarded shipments through the state and that planning for those shipments. I work closely with SAGE throughout the year and also my colleague Carl Smith from Oregon Department of Agriculture, along with our colleagues at Oregon Health Authority's Office of Radiation Protection Services, Morrow County Emergency Management, and also Oregon State University's Radiation Center. So collectively, we do the radiological emergency preparedness program. So normally about every other year, I'll speak about what's going on with the REP program. I'll go through that and then I'll get into transportation. So next slide, please. The reason that we have a radiological emergency preparedness program for Hanford, this is separate from the emergency planning zone for the Columbia Generating Station Nuclear Power Plant. U.S. Department of Energy has recognized that Hanford does have a 50-mile emergency planning zone. So in the upper right of that slide is the 50-mile EPZ, we call it. The bottom half of that is the Columbia River and the northern half of Umatilla and Morrow County. So our agency by statute is the lead for the REP program, Radiological Emergency Preparedness for Fixed Nuclear Facilities, which includes Hanford. And we're the lead to help coordinate emergency preparedness for Umatilla and Morrow County. So that's where I work closely with Sage and with Steve, Morrow County throughout the year. So the other response agencies I've already alluded to. We do exercises with U.S. Department of Energy for Hanford annually, once a year. We also do them for Columbia Generating Station, which I'm not going to talk about, but the REP program includes that. The NRC and FEMA regulate the nuclear power plant by federal statute. So we have guidelines and we get evaluated for FEMA for that. U.S. Department of Energy is self-regulating. So FEMA is not involved with Hanford oversight, but Hanford follows kind of the same rules, but the NRC doesn't oversee that piece of preparedness for them. The way that we're notified, all 6 on our team, we have state-issued cell phones. There's a fairly robust system to notify the state of Oregon as an offsite agency. There's 7 counties in the state of Washington, and the state of Washington 2 counties in Oregon and the state. So there's 9 counties total in 2 states that U.S. Department of Energy has to notify if they have any type of an incident. Go back just one slide, Matt. One more. So the lower left, when I talked about emergency planning zone, so on the left is the Hanford site-specific emergency planning zone. And you see there's lots of circles on that. So throughout the site, they have separate emergency planning zones within the site, depending on what the hazard is. Tank Farm has an EPZ, WESF has an EPZ, 324 building has an EPZ. It's all different, and some are within 1 to 2 miles. I think the largest one is 5 because it can go to general emergency. But holistically, within the emergency plan, they say there is a 50. So you recognize that depending on where the emergency could be on the site, it may not go beyond that. So that you see that is contained within the site. But the upper right shows that the larger picture is a 50-mile EPZ, which includes Oregon. Okay, go forward, please. Oh, okay. So when Hanford notifies state of Oregon, they go through the Oregon Emergency Response System. Oregon Emergency Response System is kind of the state's call center 24/7 for hazardous material incidents. And also this is how the state of Oregon gets notified for radiological emergencies. ORS is currently housed at the Oregon State Police. It is being reabsorbed by the Oregon Department of Emergency Management, where Tim used to work. And they're going to have a new call center at their facility in Salem in July. It got pushed out a year, but there is an offsite notification system. It's funny, it's called CRASH. The power plant uses it also. It's not an acronym, it's called CRASH. It's unique to our region. But if there's an urgent need, there's a timeline that they need to notify offsite agencies. So they activate the CRASH line. ORS gets notification. Hanford says, this is Hanford, and we need to notify the state of Oregon that we've got something going on. Hanford, or not Hanford, but ORS notifies us, but also Hanford notifies us. And so our phones all go off. We have a duty officer rotation amongst the 6 of us for any radiological as well as petroleum and a certain amount of electrical too. So we have a rotation. We all take 2 months out of the year. Our phones go off. We have a standard. We try and respond to that within 15 minutes, 24/7. That's why it hits all of us. So the Offsite Notification Center notifies state of Washington agencies in Oregon. Next slide, please. So this is an example. Our main conference room in our office is the Meitner Conference Room. It is also our Agency Operations Center. 30+ agencies in the state system operate agency operation centers because 30+ agencies have a lead for something. Ours is what's called Emergency Support Function 12, so we do energy, and then we are also in Emergency Support Function 10 for hazardous materials. In that cabinet, on that top shelf in the blue, are all the technical binders for the Hanford site. When they have information they want to push out on tank farms or any other facility, they send the updates, those goes in the blue binders. Matt and Tom live in those throughout the year. The red ones below are the emergency plan. That's where I live and the rest of us live if we have an incident. I get regular updates that go into those, but that is centrally located in Salem. And the plan on the right is the state's plan for CGS and Hanford emergencies. And there's also within the state's response plan, there's what's called Incident Annex 9, which I maintain, which is the radiological portion of the state's response plan. So the priorities for any kind of incident related to Hanford, of course, for any of us, if the phone rings in the middle of the night, is get the facts about what it is. Is it a classified emergency? And then how are we going to communicate with our constituents and also our partners, including Carl and Sage, that we just got notified that there's a Hanford incident. Next slide, please. So on your desk too, I also handed everybody we just updated this brochure, which also goes out to the public about our radiological emergency preparedness program. And it talks about ingestion, which Carl's going to go into a little bit in his presentation. So let's talk about the classifications. We get notified annually between 4 and 6 is the average from a normal event at the Hanford site. It's not a classified emergency. The nuclear power plant has a similar classification, but they call their first one, which is a non-emergency, unusual event. They had to be different. So when we hear NRC or someone talk about a NUI, we know they're talking about power plants because Hanford uses an abnormal event. Everything else stays in the same spectrum, an alert, site area, or GE. And an alert, which they have had classified in the past, which they had an incident at Tank Farm several years ago, which hit the level of an alert by their emergency plan. All offsite notifications were made. We got notified of it. If I'm the duty officer and I get notified that we've got an alert, I notify our internal team, our external teams, and Max as our incident commander, our radiological event manager, that we've got an alert at this. The first question we ask at Hanford Offsite Notification Center, is it escalating? Is it under control? What is it? So we can make a decision if it's an escalating alert to stand up our agency operations center. It's an automatic site area emergency and an absolute general emergency. In the 12 years that I've been doing this job, going on 13, we've had several alerts. We've hit one site area. Site area was the tunnel collapse, if everyone remembers, back in 2017. That simple, it seemed like an on-site related incident that had no bearing outside of site boundary, got both states to stand up their agents, their emergency operations centers, because it hit site area. Per the plan, we went up, and we did. Have not had a general emergency, but DOE still has some facilities on site, including WESF, until those capsules and our dry cast storage that can hit GE because of the Curie load that's there. And I think Ryan from Ecology can attest to that within their oversight there, that they know that what has the highest Curie load in the threats by the permits that they have. But the one that's got the highest, other than I think 324, is WESF. Because 324 has got its own set of issues if they scratch too hard at the ground up there, as we all know. Next slide, please. So again, just to show the comparison, at normal's Hanford, unusual, and everything else stays the same. If ORS tells us that if they use the term abnormal event, we know automatically you're talking about Hanford. Okay, next slide, please. Again, we have one full-scale exercise with U.S. Department of Energy and our Washington counterparts annually. It's not evaluated by FEMA. The power plants are evaluated by FEMA. 20+ people from our agency and our partners come into our agency operation center in Salem. And we do a full scale for about 5 hours. We send staff up to Richland, including Matt, Sarah, and Tom, and one person from our communications team to be a PIO to go to the Hanford EOC as we go through the exercise to get that real experience. And then Sage and Steve from Morrow County both stand up their EOCs in concert with us. And then Carl, our other partners from Oregon Health and OSU come in and we do it collectively. Next slide, please. This is an example of one of the notifications. Generally during the year, we don't bring you guys into the other stuff that we do. If you hear about stuff, a lot of times we'll probably say, yes, we're aware of it. Tri-State Herald will go up with an incident and say, yep, we're well aware of it, but this is the type of notification that we get and that we put out to our constituents. Because we give you guys so much information throughout the year related to all things Hanford, we just know that you trust that we're dealing with this on the emergency preparedness side. But if you ever hear of anything and you want to know, just ask us. But this is the type of things that we put out. We just normally leave the board out of it because we're already sending you a lot of information throughout the year as it is. Next slide, please. Again, just talking about the information that we put out as an example of a notification we put out related to a Hanford incident, a real incident. So going back to 2017, slide on the left is what went out on national news. Radiation disaster in Washington State. Because there was, as people, everybody's carrying smartphones now. So the way this thing played out as our phones were ringing and we were mobilizing is there were people on the site as the sirens were going off and they were going into shelters per their protocols. They were calling their family and everybody else saying, we're running to the shelters. It's a take cover alarm. Family was calling the national media, and the next thing we were chasing that story. The picture on the right is the tunnel collapse. Yeah. It was discovered. Yeah.
Was not
So you pictured, we call it a tunnel, but basically it was a covered area that they took everything out of the plutonium finishing plant and put it over years. And when their HPs were out doing regular work, which they do weekly, they got a higher reading than background at that site, which caused them to investigate. And as they got closer to the meters, then they went, and then when they reported it, it determined what it was because it was basically shine coming out of that. It reached the threshold that they needed to declare a site area emergency, which got everything else going. But the one on the left was nuclear disaster in the state of Washington that went up on national news. So next slide, please.
Well, can you define shine or like?
Think of something, simplest terms, the things within that tunnel were highly radioactive. They had a shield on top of them. You remove the shield, so you've got this going on. So when they were getting the readings, it was kind of concentrated within the specific space. It wasn't going out beyond that. It wasn't an explosion. There was no plume. It was contained. So as soon as they pushed dirt on top of it and provided shielding, problem went away. And eventually what they did was they grouted that tunnel. So they got some experience with grout on that.
Kind of like a flashlight shining up, but
That's the easiest way to think of it is think of a flashlight beam and the next thing you know, you put a lid on it and that problem was over. But the perception was the reality. So we were dealing with that perception for 2 weeks. We were up for 2 weeks on that. Sarah was one of the folks that was in the office that day, along with, she was the duty officer that day, and Dirk Denning, who was on our team where they were there. I was out of the office that day. Ken Niles was out of the office that day, a few other people, so we all were rolling back in. But in the meantime, U.S. Department of Energy went up very quickly and very effectively with their social media and their PIOs to go after that message that was going on the left. Because that took on a life of its own. And a lot of times when we get things, because it's radiological, everybody goes, oh my God. And then media went, Washington State's, uninhabitable. It was like, no, that's not what was going on.
Dave, were you at the site at the time, by the way?
I was working in town.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were aware of it, and it was the Purex tunnel.
Yeah.
And we all know, if we work there, we know what's in that tunnel. And it's stuff that is like really highly radioactive. And we just like, oh yeah, tunnel collapsed. And it was like, okay, yeah, we get taken care of. But yeah, we know from working at Hanford what was allegedly in that tunnel, and we knew how highly radioactive it was. But
It was mainly things in, the specific term, but if you think about some of the rail cars and the steel and things that were in close proximity to high sources of radiation, they became irradiated. And the easiest way to deal with it was to put some rail line, dig a trench, put a rail line in there, shove the things and put a roof on it.
Yeah.
And they did 2 of them. And that one,
That's worth repeating. There's literally a radioactive train.
yeah, they would
Yeah.
transfer the fuel from like the reactors. Like they would push it in have the fuel in a rail car. There'd be a car in between that and the engine. They'd push that down the Purex, be unloaded in the Purex. And then from what I understand, those rail cars got pushed into the tunnel because they could never use them again.
we'll deal with it in the future.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about transportation because we've already kind of teed this up. Couple of important things on this slide. It's kind of a holistic picture, but on the upper left-hand corner, the true transportation, the true campaign came to a stop, a pause in 2014 because of the incident at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant WIP. Up to that point, there were true shipments going down 84, full and empty for several years. So this is nothing new. We're just resuming this. Those are true packs on that truck and it's going up Cabbage. So that's real time, several years ago. That picture was probably taken in 2012 or 2013. Lower right-hand corner are the Navy reactor compartment shipments that regularly go up the Columbia River annually twice a year. They did, think, 2 emplacements this year. The gondola in the middle below the radioactive 7 is what we're talking about with the potential rail. The picture on the left is the performance testing, which was related to, we're getting ready for planning for the high level waste, which would be the de-inventoring of the nuclear power plants, including Trojan. So I included that picture because I got to go to that during the Denver meeting a couple years ago, because they have a dedicated train that they're getting ready for if that waste, which is a different discussion related to de-inventorying sites like Trojan, but would also include the independent spent fuel storage installation, the ISPAC at CGS, which would be a rail campaign, which would also be in the state, but that's for future transportation. But I thought I should at least mention it because it's within my planning picture. Next slide, please.
Mark, where's the spent fuel from the reactors at Reed and Oregon State?
No, it's at the Trojan site, but I'll remind me that at the end. Next slide, Matt. Sorry. So annually, we track everything that moves within the state. So to answer Jim's question, there's material that's moved, that's placarded, means it meets a sufficient threshold and quantity to be placarded. This is not medical isotopes that move everywhere all the time that Oregon Health Authority is involved with, but with the placarded material that we track, this is a typical year and what it goes by roadway and how much. And in the annual report that we push out, that we also share with you, where we talk about everything that we're tracking, this is what we're looking at. So if you get a permit to move radioactive material, called RAM permit, through the Oregon Department of Transportation, ODOT issues the permit, we collect the fee. The fee is used to train first responders throughout the state along all these routes. And that's the Division 60 work that we're doing, which we've also alluded to change the fee schedule to increase that pot. But you see on that map, where's the bulk of those shipments going? 84. What is within that number? It's not Hanford right now. That's uranium hexafluoride. So UF6 which is used in the nuclear industry to make fuel, basically leaves Ohio, comes out west, and is heading towards Framatome facility in Richland, where it's going to be converted to uranium fuel. So when we see the shipments, it's coming in, it comes in at Farewell Bend down by Ontario, and leaves at Hermiston, goes up to the Framatome facility, 30 miles up into Richland, gets converted to new fuel, and then we see a report as it's leaving, going out as new fuel. So that's been happening monthly for years. And we do training on we call that the corridor. We do training on the corridor throughout the year with trainers from Oregon Health Authority and also our lead technical specialists from Oregon State University along the corridor, also Highway 97 and I-5, because FedEx and other companies do move radioactive material through there. When we have the research reactors in the state and they need to get refueled, which doesn't happen very frequently, we would get those shipments going too. And occasionally there is a highway route controlled quantity of something like a cobalt 60 that will go through, which Max and I will get notified. We will notify our partners if there's anything planned that's called a highway route controlled quantity, which has specific parameters about how it's moving, when people are notified. There is a planned highway route controlled quantity shipment later on, which all the first responders along the 84 route where it's going to go, it's going up into Richland, it's going up to Hanford, will be notified about. And so, but that's part of our ongoing thing that we do. So we're always in this warm state because there's things going on and we're always actively involved. Next slide, please. So let's talk about TRUE. The funding mechanism, just to kind of give a little bit different perspective. This board, our staff are funded from direct grants from the U.S. Department of Energy related to cleanup, legacy sites of cleanup. So picture it goes from DC to Richland. And we work with Richland to get the funding to pay for Oregon's portion because we're in the 50-mile EPZ, because we share the Columbia River, and because you're going to be shipping TRUE through our state. That comes through one office at DOE. The transportation piece comes through Office of Packaging and Transportation. Leaves DC, goes to Carlsbad Field Office, CBFO, where WIP is. That money is dispersed to all the regions, which will be in a slide coming up. It goes to Denver, where the Western Interstate Energy Board, through the WIP TAG, the Technical Advisory Group, and the High Level Radioactive Waste Committee, different parts of the Western group, get our funding. So we get funding through DOE for Hanford related work and for transportation. So next slide, please. So we know that the Resume campaign for TRUE, which we're going to get funding for, is expected to start in 28, except for the comment that Ray made today. So on the planning side, and Max can attest to this because I drive Max, I'm like, we got to get ready for this sooner, which we are. But you also remember when we were sitting at in Richland at the meeting with Brian Harkins, remember what Brian said during that meeting? I called CBFO and said, let's get this TRUE going because we're making glass and we want to talk about grouting. So Max can attest to this, that after he said, we're going to start getting ready to go. And I picked up the phone and I called Sage and other parts and said, we're getting ready. So when this campaign goes, which right now we're projecting that it's going to be fall of 2028. There's going to be a selective roadshow that's going to be in August that we're already planning for, which will be for invited constituents, state government officials along the route first, which we will be doing outreach on, and then there'll be public, where an empty truck like that is going to be coming, which Carlsbad will, which we will go, basically, it's going to start in Washington with our partners up there. Eddie Holbrook, who is one of our colleagues at Ecology, is my colleague on that committee. Suzanne Dahl is also, they will help coordinate the Washington agencies. It's going to come into Oregon. You remember that under ORS 469 for your chart for this board, you are also involved with the true planning. So we will involve the board more as this is going, but we will start on our northern end and work our way south with this truck. The board members, constituents, emergency planners, et cetera, will be asking questions because once this kicks off, there's gonna be 2 a week for 10 years. That's 104 trips a year. And yeah, but we were already doing this. We were already in this. So this is just resuming. We've had a gap where nobody's seen it. So we're already doing the outreach to make everybody aware, including doing the training and the awareness of all the teams, the hazmat teams, the first responders, the emergency managers. So it's a team effort because they're already aware, because UF6 is already going. We're just adding to it. And next slide, please. Next slide. We know that ground is coming, but the Central Waste Complex, go back one, please. On the tours, sometimes we've gone to the Central Waste Complex. We've asked for it. So as they've characterized and identified the true over the last 11 years, it gets packaged and it's sitting there in the Central Waste Complex. And basically that Central Waste Complex is getting larger because as they've characterized, they had standstill in 2014 where they already had an inventory of it and they've added to it. So that's growing. So that's why you made the comment, I want to get this the hell out of here. Okay, so what goes into those containers? So on the left-hand side, remember that it's not liquids, it's not anything that's sloshing around through cleanup because transuranic waste includes plutonium. So the cleanup material, so if you see that barrel that's on the left, think about those things that are, I use the term crapped up, you really understand when I say crapped up? It's contaminated, it's a technical term, just like crash. So basically that material, because it is contaminated, it meets the criteria for true, so it has to be contained in that container, and that's what goes out. You can fit several of those per true pack. So when they start de-inventorying, you're running two trucks a week, you can count the number of those containers. If you think of it as a 55-gallon drum. So when you think about if a true pack were, God forbid, go into an accident, you're probably not going to get a breach to the true pack. But so you're all aware, we tell our first responders, if you had one that ever breached, because the things are so heavy and robust, that's the stuff that's going to be on the ground. It's going to be contained quickly. It's going to be cleaned up quickly and put back on the truck and on its way. Those trucks that are leaving have to meet what's called level 6. So under the commercial vehicle standards, they have to meet the highest level. So every one of those trucks, those companies are hazardous material qualified to transport level 6. Part of the training and preparedness that we're doing is to ensure that all the states along the route, from New Mexico to Washington, have trained level 6 inspectors, because when those trucks get loaded in Hanford, they have to get a level 6 inspection by state of Washington. It'll be one of my colleagues from Washington State Patrol that's going to touch that truck. They're going to touch that truck. They're going to confirm it. They're going to put a level 6 sticker on it. When it comes into Oregon and Idaho and Utah, all the states along the route, because we don't want to slow the process, have agreed that we know that it got a level 6 when it left. Unless there's a problem, we're going to let it keep on going through. If it goes out of service for a flat tire or anything else under the rules, it's going to get stopped. It's going to get another level 6 inspection before it's released. Those trucks by the plan will go into safe haven. They won't be going up Cabbage if the weather's crummy, they probably won't even leave Hanford if Cabbage has got snow and ice. If the guy came off the Cabbage and he hits LeGrand and he's got a flat tire and he goes out of service, the other nice feature about these trucks only is DOE has a system called Transcom. They're satellite tracked. So all of our duty officers, any of the emergency managers along the route will get access to Transcom, so if that truck is stopped somewhere, everybody's gonna see it live, real time. It's only used for true shipments. There's discussion about if we could incorporate Transcom into rail. That's a decision through Dewey's Office of Package and Transportation. But just to throw that in about how safe these shipments are. Next slide, please. That is the WIP routes nationally right now through all the states. That's what they look like. Next slide, please. That is the WIP tag and the 11 states that are part of the WIP tag. I'm the representative on the WIP tag for Oregon. The thing on the left is, here's another acronym, it's called the PIG. It looks like a book, it is. It's called the Program Implementation Guide. We affectionately call it the PIG. If you hear me mention the PIG, it's not a critter, it's that. The reason we have the PIG is my predecessors, the predecessors from the 11 Western states, when we resumed these back in the late 80s and early 90s, said there has to be an agreement with DOE for safe transportation of truth. So working with DOE, we came up with a program implementation guide to say how these shipments are going to happen through the 11 Western states. We have the PIG, the other states have their own. Talks about training for first responders, adequate funding, outreach, how the Transcom system, all of that. Next slide, please. And we engage DOE through a separate group. Here's another acronym, the NTSF, the National Transportation Stakeholders Forum. All the states across the country and all the regions meet annually with U.S. Department of Energy representatives from the Office of Package and Transportation in this meeting called NTSF, where they talk about what's currently occurring, what Savannah River is doing, what any other sites are doing, and Hanford. And then at that meeting, all the regional groups break out and talk about what's on the horizon. I go to NTSF with my colleagues from Washington State, Idaho, Utah, Texas, the 11 Western states. But I go to those meetings with Eddie and with Suzanne and with Kevin Osborne from Washington State Patrol, because we've been recently talking about crew campaign, but also, next slide, please. There's just here's all the regional groups. One state's not in there right now, the one's in white, unless they do a rail campaign. If they do a rail campaign, there's potential that Montana is going to get pulled in. Right now, they're not. They will get pulled into our Western group. Next slide, please. So if you go back to that slide, I don't know how far back you can jump, Max, to go, or Matt. Sorry, to go back to that slide that got a lot of the discussion going, where it talked about the potential rail routes.
Oh, man.
So the Wayback Machine, sorry. Good thing we were a combined presentation. Right there. Okay. National Academies of Science pumped that slide out. The planning group had no idea that thing existed. It got presented at a meeting a couple years ago at Denver. Because we had folks not involved in the planning process, including Federal Railroad Administration and UP Railroad and BNSF were not involved in this. The folks that put this together looked at basically, oh, there's rail lines there. It makes logical that that's going to go there. I brought this up to the rail carriers because the crowded stuff is not going to go on a dedicated train. Trojan waste and other high level will go on a dedicated train when that high level goes. This will go if it meets 49 CFR and meets the regulations to go in a commodity train as a typical hazardous material, meaning mixed load with petroleum products, chemicals, anything else, which is how this will go. It'll just go in those gondolas. BNSF and UP have said, where'd you get that map? Yes, that's UP line. Doesn't mean we're taking it that way. We determine. The rails have said we determine. Because it's not a dedicated train. Wanted you all to be aware on those discussions that we're having that, yes, we're going to make, when we know from DOE, it's going to get grouted to where it's going, we're going to be doing outreach like crazy. Matt's got the two lines in red. Because we're leaning towards that after we talk to the rail folks to say, where are you gonna take this? And it's like, it's a commodity load. It could go across to Spokane. That's where Montana comes into play, because we may go up here and make a loop because rail moves differently than truck. We know with truck and true, those are dedicated trucks. You're coming, there's no reason it can't come into Oregon because we're going into Idaho and on our way to New Mexico. That's coming. So let's say 2028 is when true is resuming, unless you hear otherwise from us. 26 or 27 possibility, let's say 28. It's a 10-year campaign. We're ramping up for a 10-year campaign for true to resume. 2 times a week, 104 times a year. We're watching this real close because if they make a decision to grout tank waste, okay, the classifying and grouting, if it meets all the criteria and they're gonna get it off and it's gonna go to Clive, it's gonna go to Waste Control Specials where it's going. We wanna know, because we've said grout it, it's clear to come into our state. We'll kind of repeat the same thing we're already doing related to getting ready for true, but it's like new kind of waste. This is what this is, do the outreach, and it's gonna go rail, different animal, different planning animal. Talk to any rail folks, we talk to a truck, we can say on a true truck, you're stopping at the state line before you hit Umatilla. Okay. Washington State Patrol, we want you to escort that thing to the scales at Umatilla. We can do that level if we needed to. Highway route controlled quantity on a trucking route, we can say, you're stopping at these points. Rail says, you meet 49 CFR, this is commerce. We're going.
So on Monday, it could go one route, and on Friday, it could go a different route.
We think they're gonna take the path of least resistance because they're looking at it to say, this is gonna be multiple years. We're gonna be picking up these things on a regular basis, along with anything else we're picking up on the route. Those red ones. But the thing for us, because the 5 of us is we're touching different pieces of this going, can make that decision by December so we know what you're doing. And it's important to all of you. So we're in that, but just know on the preparedness planning side, Oregon, Washington, the other states are going probably that red when it's coming to us, because it's like on the trucking side, Washington's only getting it for 30 miles. We get it for 200. We're gonna get it for 200 on rail too. That UP line that they're probably gonna take it because of where it's going. It's not gonna go and then anchor left and go into California and then come back over. They wanna be efficient too. But they said BNSF's gonna get it handed off to UP and it's going. Unless if it's liquid, and we've already said, Oregon's out, then it's gonna go across Washington. And then Ryan and his colleagues, in Washington, because Spokane's already been involved with this discussion too, to say that's different, but Oregon's out at that point, because we said it's liquid, it's not coming.
Could be class B or class C, in which case it has to go to Texas.
Yep. So
We're gonna have to get this conversation moving along here.
go ahead. The next one, that's it, but there was a lot.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. We probably should move on to the next agenda, but any questions on that topic? I think we really wanted to make sure that everybody understands sort of the safety theme of this meeting and how important we take the transportation shipments, and really to demonstrate the difference between the true waste and the potential future tank waste shipments. Understanding that there is a plan for true waste, and there will be a plan eventually for tank waste, but we just don't know what it is right now. And sort of continuing along, I probably should have said at the beginning of the meeting, to welcome our friends from the Oregon Department of Agriculture. I think Jeff said, why are the agriculture people? Yeah.
Somebody has to feed the workers.
Yeah, because, Carl, thank you for coming, because we work closely with our colleagues, at the Oregon Department of Agriculture on emergency management, preparation, radioactive safety. And Carl, your colleague, Sunny, forgive me, we just met today. But thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it. Let you dive in and talk about what you do and how you do it and how we all work together.
Thank you, Mark. No, we have the same question.
We hear that a lot.
Yeah. So, but nevertheless, really appreciate the invitation. Thanks, Matt, for hitting the next button.
Oh, I did.
So I'll start first with my introduction, and we'll go with Sunny. So Carl Smith, Scottle Smith, but I go by Carl. No one can say my name in real life. So I work for the Food Safety, Animal Health and ID, and Lab Services Division. I'm within that division. And I'm with the Food Safety Program. I'm one of the program managers within that program. And the programs I manage are the dairy and the state meat inspection program. So I actually came here yesterday, met up with 2 of our staff and went to go see the 3 Mile Dairy, mega dairy that's about to get started. It's just such a beautiful project. So before ODA, I worked from 2001 to 2008 with the Wasco Sherman Health Department as a food safety inspector, but also on the public health emergency and preparedness. So that's how I got to get into preparedness. On the public health side, now it's the North Central Public Health. And then in 2008, I joined Oregon Department of Agriculture, and I became a manager in 2015, and here we are. So with that said, Sunny.
Good afternoon. My name is Sunny Summers. I'm a senior policy advisor with the Oregon Department of Agriculture in the director's office, which means I do a little bit of everything. I've been with ODA come January, it'll be 20 years. I think I remember coming to a meeting here the first year that I worked for ODA with the Oregon Board of Agriculture. So similar kind of situation. I do not have the emergency background that Carl does. I used to be in our pesticide enforcement program, used to be a field investigator and then a case reviewer. Unlike Mark, I do pretend to be a lawyer. I have a third of a law degree from Willamette, Master of Legal Studies. So like I said, I play one on TV, but I'm not actually a lawyer as well. And so one of the many other duties as assigned is emergency management for ODA, which I kind of signed up for because I think it's interesting and very important. Although I do sit in meetings once in a while and go, how does this tie into agriculture? But I think there's more ties, and the breadth of the work that we do at our agency that you will hear about today may help you understand where we do tie in.
Correct. Yeah, thanks for that segue. So I wanted to start with this first slide just because, we really focus on a resilient economy and being an economy driver. So, 42 billion in overall impact is quite a bit for a small agency such as ours. Next slide, please. And these are just the top 20 commodities. A lot of them are here or within the area. You'll see that, we are a pretty, we're not maybe a big state producer like others, but we're very diverse, which is great. And I maintain the product that are coming out of Oregon are top-notch quality when it comes to agriculture. Next, please. So we're going to do a little plug in here. So this is our mission statement agency-wide. We can go to the next one. I'll leave you with a slide. You can see that. I do want to go a little bit into the organizational structure, just because, like I said, I'm in the food safety program and I participate in this emergency GSX and the exercises. But when we dive deeper into the exercise itself, there's a lot of different programs that would get touched if there was a situation. So a little bit small, but let's go to the next slide. Maybe you can see that better. We got the natural resources, plant protection and conservation. There's food safety, animal health. We have ag services and administrative services. So all of them really tying in together with our department today. Next, please. This is just our food safety program's mission statement and prevent the spread of foodborne illnesses. That's short and sweet. Goes further into that, but within our program, I do wanted to talk a little bit about the food safety program because we're the ones that are in the exercise, right? So we have a program director. We do have some vacant program and office manager positions. We have 2 supporting staffs. And then we have 3 managers where I'm one of them. We have different programs, which we will get to in a sec. And then we have our program experts that are right underneath our name. So, you see for me, I have a dairy specialist and a meat specialist that oversee
And then we have also 29 field staff that are out and about. The field staff and our specialists are out doing inspections. Managers are there to be as a resources. Next, please. And within ODA, the licenses that we oversee and regulate are, retail facilities, bakeries. We have meat that you find in retail store, but we also do state meat inspection program, which is equivalent to the USDA program. That product has to stay within Oregon, but it's exactly the same as the USDA FSAS programs. We do eggs, processing, and on and on and on, dairy, shellfish, you name it. But at the bottom bullet, I wanted to put how we have 13,500 licenses where those, 29 staff and then the 8 specialists go out and inspect. So each inspector has their own territory with zip codes and about 300 to 350 licenses in their area that they have to inspect.
Carl, how often do those have to be touched?
Good question. Different licenses have different frequencies, months between inspections. The dairy program is very highly regulated, so you can have facilities or situations where you go and inspect every 3 months. And then some are six months, and then we have 1 year, 2 years, and maybe up to 3 years. It goes by how I don't want to say critical. Now I'm forgetting my words, but high risk a facility is or isn't. If it's a low risk facility, then the frequency is a lot higher. If it's a high risk facility, then we go a lot more frequent. Next, please. We also do swabathons and food sampling, environmental sampling, and I put in there what we basically will be doing in emergency. At least exercise that we're doing here. Sampling and monitoring food, water, and animal feed. I'm with Food Safety Program, but we also have within our division the animal program, which is run by our state vet. So next, please. I think we go 2 slides back real quick because I think I jumped over one because these are our next one. I'm sorry, forward. One more. There you go. Thanks.
Okay, emergency.
Emergencies, yes. So, we do deal with emergencies on a daily basis. They're a little bit different, whether it's fire, floods, backups of sewage, quite recently boil water notices last
We don't have
weekend.
nuclear emergency on here, Carl.
That's on the more. We were waiting last Saturday with Portland, actually, one part of Portland, to see whether we were going to go on a boil water notice. Thanks to a positive E. coli they had in one of their samples, but on the resample, it came back negative on a Saturday. So we have quite a few of these right now. We're in a big recall going on with baby formula by Health going on right now. So on and on and on. And as you can see there, HPI is with us, bird flu. It's a weekly meeting, just hearing about where we're at with the bird flu and with our animals and trying to keep them out of our food.
Crab sampling soon?
Crab sampling, we're going right now through our pre-season testing. First you got to test, and what we test for are the moic acid, which it can bioaccumulate in your system and affect your liver and whatnot. So there's standards for those before they can be consumed or even exported or shipped. So right now we're in the pre-season testing. We're in the holiday month with the lab being closed, and so it's very high energy and anxiety weeks going on right now within our program. Next, please. All right, so next again.
Next to I do.
Yep, look, this one here is just, we have a brand new lab, which is just amazing. Anytime you're in Wilsonville and you like to get a tour, we'd be happy to show how really nice that laboratory is. It's a different program labs under one roof where it's made that process a lot more efficient when getting things tested, especially when one equipment that breaks where you can borrow from another while you're ordering.
Am I seeing solar panels on that roof?
No.
No, I think this is the siding.
No, I think there might be. This is
there.
the old Microsoft facility in Wilsonville, and it's supposed to be one of the most earthquake resilient buildings that the state of Oregon owns or operates. So we have labs, OSHA's there, state police, I think, has some facilities.
Do you have radiological testing capability?
We don't,
think
and we
so.
go to OSU.
We'll get that second, that process.
I do have a key card for this building, so if I can make it there in an emergency, after an earthquake, it's just a beautiful building. But, you know, a lot of the great things about it, great for lab is, you know, it doesn't vibrate and shake, so your most sensitive equipment will be able to do what they're supposed to. Next, we'll get into emergency preparedness in a second. Getting into it now. So within the food safety program, we have what we call our Be Food Safe and Central Office System. That's where all of our licensed, those 13 and a half licenses are housed. So next slide, please. So technically, I can go within this program anywhere that I have access, even here, and I can run reports to tell me, you know, per zip code, per processor. Think of all the data you have in there. You can do a query based upon those, you know, thousands of data, really distinct data. Next, please. Where this comes handy is, you know, so when we have our exercise, right? And, you know, and I'm sitting there and we're trying to figure out maybe where a plume of radiochemical materials is finding their way. You know, sometimes in coordination with the state of Washington, as we're getting ready to maybe do a public release through whether it's, you know, just us together through a jig. I'm able to go in our system and really look at within the food safety part of it, what are these facilities that we license that are being affected. At the same time, I can contact another program area manager and I can ask them to, you know, supply a list of, you know, because again, the exercise is just us being there, maybe collecting a milk sample. But as we've done this or gotten into the exercise more and deeper into the exercise, we're like, well, but that's not the only commodity with here, you know, so we have feedlots, we have growers, we have
Can I
a lot of
interject something just real quick, just for
Yes.
some more context? So when we do an exercise, they simulate a plume of radioactive material that has come into Oregon. So we're in ingestion state, so we're concerned about the food products within Morrow and Umatilla County that are underneath that plume. So when we do this, they generate a fictional plume that comes over. It gives us something to work on to say, what's the impact? And that's what Carl and his team will look at to say, what's growing in the ground right now? What's going to be impacted? That's where he pulls this data in.
Mhm. Thank you. Yep. Let's see, next, so we can go by zip code, we can go by anything. And then we can get to the point where if we need, we're